Chapter 647. The Heavenly Tao has really put in a lot of effort. After a moment of silence, the group of powerful beings said in an inexplicable tone. Their words were already very clear. As long as they suppressed their strength below that of Xianxia in the future, the Sea of Laws would not have the slightest effect on them. They could do whatever they wanted in the primordial world. The conditions had already been given. If they violated it and displayed strength comparable to Xianxia, then don't blame the Heavenly Tao for being merciless and forcefully bringing them out of the primordial world. Fellow Taoists, you are all virtuous people. I think you should understand the painstaking efforts of the Heavenly Tao to protect the primordial world. No wonder the Heavenly Tao is so serious. It's really because the tragedy that happened previously was too horrifying. Seeing that everyone was gradually accepting the facts in front of them, Xianxia said hypocritically. What painstaking efforts of the Heavenly Tao! This plan was clearly planned by him. The Heavenly Tao was just pushing the boat with the current. But now, in order to get himself out of it, Xianxia simply took advantage of the opportunity when everyone did not understand the specific situation and directly threw the blame on the Heavenly Tao. It was no wonder that Xianxia was like this. It was really so big that only the Heavenly Tao could take the blame. Anyway, he could not afford to take the blame. The separation of heaven and earth was undoubtedly a great thing for the primordial world. However, once this move was successful, it would definitely offend all the experts of the primordial world. Even if Xianxia boasted that he had countless trump cards, he would not dare to do such a thing. Therefore, he was afraid that others would discover that he was the one who planned all of this behind the scenes. Of course, he had to throw all the blame away before the incident happened. And the best candidate to take the blame, who else could it be other than the Heavenly Tao? First of all, the Heavenly Tao was strong enough. Other than Pangu, he was the strongest. Secondly, the Heavenly Tao did not know how to speak. Even if he knew that Xianxia had thrown the blame on him, he would not take the initiative to explain all of this to the powerful beings. It was probably disdain. Finally, he did not have to worry about his revenge after throwing the blame on the Heavenly Tao. That was because this was according to his intentions. If the Heavenly Tao took revenge on Xianxia because of this, who would dare to work for him in the future? Your Majesty is right. Laughing awkwardly, the group of powerful beings said embarrassedly. Xianxia's words. It really made them unable to accept it. Who was the Heavenly Tao guarding against? It was all because of them, the great magics. If the magi and demons had not gone overboard back then and shattered the primordial world, causing the Heavenly Tao to be afraid, so many things would not have happened. The group of great mystic powers thought in their hearts as they were filled with regret. If they had known what was going to happen today, they wouldn't have stood aside and watched the battle between the liches and demons. Instead, they would have stepped forward to stop it. They believed that as long as they dissuaded them in time, the liches and demons would not fight at all. Moreover, even if they were to fight, the scale wouldn't be that big. At the very least, they could persuade people to fight in the chaos beyond the heavens. Not to mention how regretful everyone was. After Xianxia finished speaking, no one doubted his words. From this, it could be seen that Xianxia had successfully shifted the blame. That's right. Such an offending thing. Who would have thought that it was proposed by a human and not the Heavenly Tao itself? Even if someone suspected that this method was thought of by a human, they would not suspect Xianxia. After all, everyone knew that great Emperor Ziwei had a promising future. He could cultivate to the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian while staying at home. Why would he do such a thing as digging his own grave? What was the difference between becoming enemies with a group of great mystic powers and ending one's own future? No one believed that Xianxia would be so unwise. Fellow Taoists, after the separation of heaven and earth, there will definitely be a great change in the primordial world. In my opinion, we should return to our respective dojos and observe the changes in heaven and earth. Seeing everyone's expressions, Xianxia knew that his plan to shift the blame to the Heavenly Tao had completely succeeded. He could not help but be overjoyed. However, his expression did not change. He still advised everyone unhurriedly. Yes. Poor Wei and the others will leave now. Go back and experience the changes in heaven and earth with your heart to deal with the future changes in the primordial world. After Xianxia finished speaking, everyone seemed to have found a way out and left one after another. If they continued to stay here, it would be too awkward. They felt as if they were being targeted by the Heavenly Tao. It was better to leave quickly. As for the matter of blocking the separation of heaven and earth, no one mentioned it at all. The sincerity of the heavenly Tao. It was already very obvious. If they raised an objection at this time, wouldn't it be obvious that they had a guilty conscience? Otherwise, why would they object? What were they trying to do by displaying the combat strength of a great mystic powers in the primordial world? At this moment, regardless of whether they had a guilty conscience or not, once they raised it, it would be like yellow mud falling into their pants. It would be shit even if it wasn't shit. They would definitely be remembered by the heavenly Tao. Therefore, no one dared to object. They all left in a hurry. Sigh. This matter? It's considered over, right? After everyone left, Feng Zichen let out a long sigh of relief and completely relaxed. Back then, when he formulated the plan to separate heaven and earth, he was only thinking about the benefits to the primordial world and even the human race. He had forgotten that this was a job that would offend people. At that time, he didn't think much of it. Now that he thought about it, he was really scared. Those were all the great mystic powers in the primordial world. If he was not careful, if he was hated by all the great mystic powers, he might suddenly disappear. Although Feng Zichen was powerful, almost no one in the primordial world could do anything to him. However, how many of the great mystic powers who could live until today were easy to deal with? Even the remnant spirit of the chaos demon god was killed by them. Not only did they fail to possess him, but they also swallowed him and became nutrients for his growth. From this, one could see how extraordinary the methods of the great mystic powers were. If he was targeted by them, even if he didn't die, he would lose a layer of skin. How could Feng Zichen not be afraid? Fortunately, he was witty and threw the blame on the heavenly Tao in time, saving a big trouble for the future. If he didn't mention it today, this matter would be over. Even if the great mystic powers reacted in the future, with the endorsement of the heavenly Tao, this matter would be ridiculous. Heaven and earth have been separated. The situation of the primordial world is about to change. After taking a deep look at the void of the primordial world, Feng Zichen turned around and returned to the Ziwei star. Not long after he returned to the Ziwei star, the endless rules in the primordial world slowly changed. Rumble. Endless Tao runes scattered out and scattered into the primordial world, causing inexplicable changes. The first to bear the brunt was naturally the world tree that stood between heaven and earth. Crash! The void cracked open silently, and the origin of heaven and earth flowed out of the huge crack. Like a waterfall, it poured onto the world tree. And the origin of heaven and earth. For the world tree, it was the best nourishment for growth. Phew! Phew! After absorbing the origin of heaven and earth, the world tree grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon it grew taller. Rumble! Rumble! A huge rumble resounded throughout the entire primordial world. It was the sound of the heaven realm. It was constantly rising, and the distance between it and the primordial world was getting farther and farther. It was pushed up by the world tree. The world tree stood tall, and its crown held up the entire heaven realm. And now, as the world tree rose, the heaven realm above it would naturally be affected and rise with it. This was the beginning of the changes in the primordial world. Every time the heaven realm rose a little, the rules of the primordial world changed a little. It was still all right. Compared to before, although there were some differences, there were not many changes. However, the space-time laws of the entire world, and even the great Tao of space-time, underwent earth-shaking changes as the distance between the heaven realm and the primordial world continued to increase. The flow of time between the heaven realm and the earth gradually became unequal. To be precise, the flow of time in the heaven realm gradually slowed down. Compared to the primordial world, it seemed to be twice as slow. In other words, 2 days in the primordial world was only 1 day in the heaven realm. Moreover, this ratio wasn't fixed either. As the distance between the heaven realm and the primordial world increased, it was constantly changing. It was getting bigger and bigger. In short, this change could not be completed in a short period of time. It would take a long time to evolve. It would not stop until it reached a threshold. Not long after the separation of heaven and earth, the restrictions between heaven and earth naturally appeared in everyone's minds, allowing them to understand everything. Tai Jingxian level power is not allowed to appear? After hearing this news, the patriarchs of the myriad clans clearly heaved a sigh of relief. It was good that they did not completely cut off the connection between heaven and earth. This way they would have a way out. Huh. Wait. below Tai Jingxian, gold immortal? Damn it! The human race is really good. After a while, some people seemed to have thought of something and could not help but snort coldly. The heavenly Tao was fair. It would not deliberately favor that race. Therefore, the restriction that did not allow power above the gold immortal level to appear was targeted at all living beings in the primordial world, including the human race. From this, it could be seen that the human race's actions were quite self-defeating. However, from another perspective, one would realize that this restriction was extremely biased towards the human race. That was because in the primordial world, the human race had the most gold immortals. After all, the human race had a larger base. Perhaps it was difficult for them to produce any experts, but with the resources of the entire primordial world, it was easy for them to produce mid to low-end experts like gold immortals. Therefore, after millions of years, there were not many Daluo Jingxian and not many Tai Jingxian of the human race. However, there were definitely countless gold immortals. Even if all the gold immortal experts of the myriad clans were added together, they would probably not be as many as the human race. This was nothing in the past. However, after the separation of heaven and earth, the existence of the gold immortal level leaped to the top of the primordial world. The benefits that the human race, which had the most gold immortals in the primordial world, received could be imagined. They could sweep through the myriad clans. Thinking of this, how could the patriarchs of the myriad clans' faces not be ugly? This was simply the heavens and earth helping the human race. However, they did not have the chance to reason it out. Saying that the heavenly Tao was unfair? Were they blind? Didn't they see that the heavenly Tao treated everyone equally and restricted them as it wished? Not to mention the human race, even the powerful beings were restricted by it. In this way, who could say that the heavenly Tao was unfair? The myriad clans were inferior to the human race. They could only say that they were useless and could not compete with others. They could not blame others. Your Majesty, we still have important matters to attend to, so we'll take our leave first. The more they thought about it, the more aggrieved they felt. The experts of the myriad clans really did not want to stay here any longer. Looking at the happy and smug faces of the humans, they immediately bid farewell to Xianxia. At this moment, they did not intend to, nor did they dare to, fuss over the matter of Xianxia tricking them to come here to worship the heavens and earth. Since you have something to do and have left, I won't hold you back. Xianxia was indeed in the wrong for what happened today. In the future, I will definitely give you a big gift to apologize to you. Xianxia could naturally think of what the patriarchs of the myriad clans could think of, and he thought even further. Therefore, he was extremely happy in his heart. He did not care about the attitude of the patriarchs of the myriad clans and directly said. At the same time, he also apologized to everyone. I wouldn't dare. Even if your Majesty didn't say it, we would have taken the initiative to rush over when we found out about such a major event that has contributed to the primordial world. How could we blame your Majesty for this matter? Seeing Xianxia's smug expression, everyone was extremely annoyed. However, they did not dare to show it on their faces. They all said with a righteous expression. At this time, the matter had already been done. It was useless to be upset and regretful. Instead, it would make others look down on them. It was better to act righteous in exchange for a good reputation. It's good that you understand, fellow Taoists. Xianxia smiled and did not expose everyone's thoughts. He echoed from the side. He had already taken all the advantage. Why couldn't he let others have a taste of their mouths? It was fine to be smug, but they could not forget themselves. In this way, after a few pleasantries, the patriarchs of the myriad clans left one after another. You guys are still too naive. Since the human race dares to push the plan of separating heaven and earth, how can they not have any backup plans? You guys, you think too simply of the human race. After the figures of the patriarchs of the myriad clans completely disappeared, Xianxia's face could not help but reveal a strange smile. There was one thing. He did not tell the patriarchs of the myriad clans. That was, the restrictions of the heavenly Tao did not affect him. He could still exert the strength of a half-step primordial chaos. He did not have to worry about being taken away by the guiding divine light. Moreover, it was not just him. Even the other elders and ministers of the human race were not affected in the slightest. To be precise, any existence that was protected by the luck of the human race their strength would not be affected by the heavenly Tao. Thinking about it, it made sense. As the protagonist of heaven and earth, how could the human race not have privileges? Otherwise, what was the purpose of the title of the protagonist of the myriad clans fighting for the world? Wasn't it all for the unique treatment? And not being restricted by the heavenly Tao was one of the privileges of the human race. What was the protagonist of heaven and earth? That was the symbol of the orthodoxy of heaven and earth. Since it was the orthodoxy of heaven and earth, then the position conferred by the human race was equivalent to obtaining the approval of heaven and earth. It was a kind of karmic position, so naturally, it would not be restricted by the heavenly Tao. Of course. However, this was not an unlimited amount of resources. Chapter 648. The so-called conferment of the human emperor mainly relied on the destiny of the human race. However, the destiny of the human race was not unchanged. It would change with the change of the human emperor. In other words, the conferment of the human emperor had a time limit. A generation of emperors and ministers. After the change of the human emperor, unless the new emperor still conferred the positions of those ministers, they would no longer be protected by the destiny of the human race and lose the ability to break the restrictions of the heavenly Tao. Golden Immortal was their limit. Thinking about it, this was normal. The human emperor was only the human emperor after all, not the celestial emperor. If his power was not limited, where would the celestial emperor be? In the end, the most supreme ruler of the primordial world was still the celestial emperor. His power was permanent. The human emperor was just a weakened version of the celestial emperor. His status was only comparable to the 4 heavenly emperors. After today, the rise of the human race is inevitable. There will be no opponents in the primordial world. The myriad races will be completely crippled. The day when the human race redefines humanity is not far away. Secretly clenching his fists, Xianxia thought excitedly. The dream that countless martyrs of the human race had been looking forward to day and night would be realized in his hands. What an exciting scene. Everyone, it's time to leave. After a long while, Xianxia finally calmed down and spoke to the crowd with a calm expression on his face. Yes, Your Majesty. The elders of the human race responded in unison and left with Emperor Xianxia, returning to the human race. At this point, the primordial world regained its peace. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, more than 300,000 years had passed. During these 300,000 years, Feng Zichen was not idle. He was still vigilant and carefully observed the movements of the primordial world to prevent the chaos demon god from suddenly attacking. Although the Sea of Laws was strong, it could not stop the existence of the primordial chaos level. Even the powerful ones could not stop it. The reason why he could make the powerful ones afraid was not because he was strong, but because of the deterrence of the heavenly Tao. His existence indicated the attitude of the heavenly Tao. The powerful ones did not dare to defy the heavens, so they were naturally afraid of him. And the deterrence of the heavenly Tao to the chaos demon gods, that was simply bullshit. Since when did the chaos demonic gods need to worry about the heavenly Tao? Shouldn't they do whatever they want? Therefore, the Sea of Laws couldn't stop the chaos demon god. Of course, this did not mean that the Sea of Law was completely useless. At the very least, he could obstruct the chaos fiend god when he attacked. The Sea of Law covered the boundary between heaven and earth. If the chaos demonic god attacked the untainted land from the outside, he would not be able to avoid this place. He was the first to bear the brunt. With the chaos fiend god's power, which far exceeded that of ordinary primordial chaos Tao masters, the Sea of Laws would definitely not be able to withstand it and would be blasted into pieces. However, no matter what, the Sea of Laws was established by the heavenly Tao to isolate the primordial world. No matter how useless it was, it still had some prestige. Although it couldn't block the attack of the chaos demon god, it could still serve as a buffer. Even if this buffer time was only 1/10,000th of an instant. However, this 1/10,000th of an instant was enough for the heavenly Tao and many great divine abilities to react and intercept in time. What was the most terrifying thing about the chaos demon god? It was not their terrifying strength. Although their strength was indeed terrifying, this was the most terrifying thing. The most frightening thing about him was his elusive figure. The chaos demon god was very strong, but the heavenly Tao was not weak either. If they really fought, the chaos demon god would definitely not be a match for the heavenly Tao. However, the Chaos Demon God was not a fool. Why would they fight head-on with the heavenly Tao? Hiding in the dark, jumping out to cause trouble from time to time, that was the best choice. Yes, in fact, that was what the Chaos Demon God did. Every time there was a major change in the untainted land, they would jump out to cause trouble, which was extremely annoying. Especially, when everyone was unprepared, the demon god of chaos suddenly appeared and attacked the untainted land fiercely. That was the most terrible thing. Because no one could guard against that. No one could be sure when the chaos demon god would choose to attack. An invisible enemy was the scariest. But with the Sea of Law, everything was different. No matter when the chaos demon god chose to attack, he could not bypass the Sea of Law. Once he attacked, he would definitely be sensed by it. And this gave everyone time to react. The chaos demon god, who was no longer elusive, was much easier to deal with. Making the chaos demon god turn from light to darkness was another great effect of the Sea of Law in addition to isolating heaven and earth. Maintaining vigilance for a long time was a huge burden for Xianxia, but for Feng Zichen, who had a perfect mind, there was no burden at all. To be precise, from the moment his mind was perfect, he had been in a state of vigilance. This was one of the symbols of the primordial chaos realm, merging with heaven and earth, merging with the great Tao, observing all things with one's heart. Strange. Why hasn't the chaos demon god made a move yet? This is not like the chaos demon god in my memory. When did they become so tolerant? Could it be that? What's wrong with them? After waiting for a long time for the chaos demon god to make a move, Feng Zichen could not help but mutter in his heart. It had been 300,000 years, not to mention the chaos demon god taking revenge. They had not even shown their faces, and there was no news of them in the primordial world. It was as if all the chaos demon gods suddenly disappeared collectively. This was very abnormal. The chaos demon god did not show up for a long time. Either he was holding back some big move to give the primordial world a ruthless blow, or there was something wrong with them internally, so they had no time to attack the primordial world. However, something happened to the chaos demon gods collectively. Was this possible? In theory, Feng Zichen should be more inclined to the first possibility. But in fact, Feng Zichen vaguely felt that the second situation was more likely to happen. If it were in the past, he would definitely think that the second situation was nonsense. The chaos demon gods. How could something happen to them collectively? Wasn't this nonsense? Who could have such great ability to cause something to happen to them together? However, connecting it to the recent attack of Pangu, Feng Zichen could not help but wonder if Pangu had seriously injured all the chaos demon gods when he had manifested last time, which was why they could not continue to stir up trouble in the primordial world. Otherwise, why didn't they attack? They didn't even show their faces? The more he thought about it, the more Feng Zichen felt that this was very likely. Thinking about it. News about the chaos demon gods. When did it begin to disappear? Wasn't it after Pangu made his move? Didn't all of this mean that this matter had something to do with Pangu? It couldn't be that Pangu would attack the chaos demon gods for no reason, right? There had to be a reason. And suppressing the development of the chaos demon gods, so as to give the great mediums of the primordial world a chance to catch up, wasn't that the best reason? After all, the cultivation of the chaos demon gods was called recovery of cultivation. The cultivation of the great mediums was to break through the realm. The difficulty of the two sides was completely different. If nothing went wrong, the great mediums couldn't catch up with the chaos demon gods in terms of cultivation progress. Therefore, at this time, they needed to cheat for the great mediums or increase the difficulty for the chaos demon gods to prevent the strength of the chaos demon gods from surpassing the great mediums too much, causing an imbalance between the two sides. No matter what, the forces of the primordial world had to surpass the chaos demon gods. Even if they couldn't surpass them, at the very least, they should reach a subtle balance. Otherwise, if the gap between the two sides was too big, how could the great mediums play? It wouldn't be long before the entire primordial world would be swallowed by the chaos demon gods. It was probably because of this consideration that Pangu chose to attack the chaos demon gods. Thinking about it, the chaos demon gods did not appear for a long time. It was not difficult to understand. Father God is Father God. He thinks more thoroughly than others. It's really hard for the chaos demon gods. It was not easy for him to get freedom. Before he could have a good time, he was targeted by Pangu again. It's really miserable. Feng Zichen, who imagined all this, couldn't help but feel sympathy for the chaos demon gods. No one would be happy to encounter such a terrible thing. As for whether his guess was accurate or not, Feng Zichen felt that it should be close to the mark. Even if there was a mistake, it wouldn't be too big. That was because the strength of the chaos demon gods should be suppressed. Look, the chaos demon gods had just been released, and there were already more than 20 Daluo Jingxian of primordial chaos on the surface, which had long surpassed the primordial world by a lot. And this was only on the surface. Who knew how many more were hidden in the dark? If they were not suppressed, how could the great mediums of the primordial world fight with the chaos demon gods? In the end, he was still suppressed by them. At that time, it was not certain who had the final say in the primordial world. In the face of such a situation, Feng Zichen pushed others. He felt that if he were Pangu, he would definitely limit the strength of the chaos demon gods to give the great mediums a chance to surpass them. Sigh. Father God is too much. He made a move without telling us. We are guessing here and there and can't figure out his purpose. Feng Zichen sighed and said with emotion. Panga's move directly interrupted the current rhythm of the primordial world. He didn't know how many changes it would cause. What an eventful time. However, he was about to break through, and what he needed the most was stability. At this time, there were unknown changes in the primordial world. Wouldn't it give him a headache? As for his guess, it was easy to verify. As long as the next time the chaos demon gods made a move, he would be able to tell whether it was true or not. If the strength of the chaos demon gods did not increase much compared to before, then there was no doubt that they must have been affected by Pangu. On the contrary, if their strength had undergone an earth-shattering change, it meant that Feng Zichen's guess was wrong, and Pangu's attack should be somewhere else. That was the real trouble. Because oftentimes, the unknown was the most frightening. 300,000 years was enough for too many things to happen. Especially for the current human race, there were changes every year, let alone 300,000 years. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was earth-shattering. After cutting off heaven and earth. Except for some clansmen who did not want to stay in the human world and chose to ascend to the heaven realm, most of the experts of the human race chose to enter the heavenly palace and stay in the human world to protect the human race. Of course, one had to admit that in a sense, the future of going to the heaven realm was indeed more promising than staying in the human race. After all, the heaven realm had become the center of the primordial world. It gathered the luck of the entire primordial world, and even the endless big, small, and medium worlds. It also gathered countless experts. Compared to the heaven realm, the heavenly palace of the human race could not compare to the heaven realm except for the fact that it was on par with him in terms of spiritual energy. Building a cart behind closed doors. How could it be compared to brainstorming? How could one know the vastness of the world if one did not see the vastness of the world? To be honest, if the human experts stayed in the human race and did not go to the heaven realm, it would not be a good thing. As time passed, they would gradually be abandoned by the times and fall behind others. However, from another point of view, it was precisely because of these experts that the human race's position as the overlord of the primordial world was established. It was hard to say whether the choice was good or bad. Of course, it was impossible for Feng Zichen to not see such an obvious drawback. In his heart, he already had a solution. One had to know that the goal of the human race was to surpass the shamans and demons. In order to achieve this goal, Feng Zichen had paid a huge price. Now, seeing that the human race had just shown signs of rising and had the possibility of catching up with the shamans and demons, how could he allow such a thing to drag the human race down? Therefore, he planned to cheat the human race to solve this drawback. According to his plan, he planned to use the connection between the heavenly palace and Zhousing to forcefully open a passage between heaven and earth so that the human experts could freely travel to and from the heaven realm. At this point, when the human experts had nothing to do, they could use this passage to visit friends in the heaven realm and ask for new information so that they would not be abandoned by the times. If this method was successful, it could immediately solve the drawback of the human experts staying in the human world. And this was not Feng Zichen's entire plan. Opening a passage between heaven and earth for the human race might guarantee that the human race's strength would always far surpass the 10,000 races. But it could not guarantee that the human race's strength would be able to catch up with the shamans and demons. Therefore, this required a second plan. As for the second plan, Feng Zichen turned his attention to the countless large, medium, and small worlds outside the primordial world. Every world contained unimaginable good fortune. Even if they only obtained a trace of it, it was enough for cultivators below Daluo Jingxian to benefit endlessly. Feng Zichen's goal was to find a way to contact the upper-class world so that the human race could benefit from it. This was naturally extremely difficult for others, but it was different for Feng Zichen. There was no other reason. He had the World Tree. With the ability of the World Tree, it could completely help him communicate with the various worlds. Chapter 649. If it was in the past. Even with the help of the World Tree, Feng Zichen might not be able to do this. But now, with the help of the origin of heaven and earth, the World Tree had just completed an upgrade, and its ability had been greatly improved. It was just enough to meet Feng Zichen's goal of connecting the 10,000 worlds. However, this matter was not urgent. Connecting the 10,000 worlds was one thing, and sending people into the 10,000 worlds was another. The difficulty of the two was completely different, and he still needed to plan carefully. The most important thing at the moment was to open up the passage of heaven and earth in the heavenly palace, so that it would be convenient for the human experts to return to the heaven realm. However, re-establishing contact with the 10,000 worlds this time was also of great significance to Feng Zichen. One had to know that before the demon clan slaughtered humans, he had sent many human prodigies into the upper-class world to fight for the future of the human race. He did not know how those human prodigies were doing in the upper-class world after so many years. Did he manage to forcefully take down a world, control its origin, and sit on the supreme position of the Realm Lord, as he had hoped? Of course. This was just Feng Zichen's extravagant hope. After all, the current situation was completely different from what he had imagined back then. When he had sent the human prodigies away, he had not expected the Chaos Demon God to escape and flee to the upper-class world. Just this point brought about a great change to his wonderful plan. At this moment, not to mention controlling the upper-class world, Feng Zichen's greatest request for those human prodigies was that they could survive well. For those young people, the thought of being enemies with a chaos demonic god was a terrifying thing. Speaking of which, Feng Zichen had sent them into the upper-class world with good intentions. His original intention was to find an opportunity for them to prove their Tao and leave some seeds for the human race at the same time. However, he did not expect that the Chaos Demon God would suddenly escape. Instead, it made them, who should have been the safest group of people, the most unsafe group. It was really sigh. All kinds of words could only turn into a helpless sigh. Who could have foreseen such a thing? In fact, becoming the Realm Lord. It wasn't completely hopeless. At the very least, Feng Zichen was looking forward to it. It should be known that in the 3,000 sectors, in addition to the human clan's supreme talents, there were also his 3 disciples. Feng Jie, Jianghu, Jianghu. These 3 people were all people with great luck. Their talents could be said to be peerless. In the future, their achievements would be unrivaled great magics. Ever since he had taken them in as his disciples, Feng Zichen had always had high hopes for the 3 of them, believing that the human race would once again achieve glory in their hands. For this reason, Feng Zichen kept the 3 of them by his side and personally taught them for a period of time. In the past, before the human race encountered a great calamity, the 3 of them had disappeared without a trace. Feng Zichen had been worried for a long time. It was only when he divined that the 3 of them had other opportunities and were swept into the Great Thousand Realms that he was temporarily relieved. Until today. It had been nearly 10 million years since Feng Jie and the other 2 left the untainted land and were lost in the Great Thousand World. What a long period of time. It was almost equivalent to half of the history of the human race. Thinking about it, it had been 10 million years. With Feng Jie and the other 2's talent, they should have long cultivated Daluo Jingxian or even gone further. With such strength. In addition, with the 3 of them working together, even if they were not as good as the Chaos Fiend God, it was enough to protect themselves. Perhaps, surpassing the Chaos Fiend God and taking over a world was still unknown. Cultivation. It was a miracle. Therefore, the matter of cultivators. Then, anything could happen. Feng Jie and the other 2. They might be able to create miracles. This was Feng Zichen's greatest expectation for them. Perhaps, after I attain the Tao, I should go to the Great Thousand Realms to take a look. Those children have been away from home for too long. It's time to look for them and see how they are doing. On the Emperor Star, Feng Zichen looked at the huge world tree that stood between heaven and earth. He seemed to see countless worlds, and he couldn't help but have a lot of thoughts in his mind. Rumble! In the void that no one could see, streaks of resplendent starlight descended from the boundless starry sky and landed in the territory of the human race, in the heavenly cycle palace that belonged to the human race. This was Feng Zichen using a supreme method to distort spacetime and forcefully open 365 passageways to the heaven realm for the human race. Because these passageways had to bypass the Sea of Laws, Feng Zichen had no choice but to rely on Zhouxing's power. Otherwise, even someone as powerful as him would not be able to bypass the perception of the Sea of Laws and open the connection between heaven and earth. The Sea of Laws isolated everything. It was not a joke. It was only because Zhouxing had a special status that he could provide an endless supply of star power to the earth that his power would not be restricted by the Sea of Laws. Otherwise, the living beings of the primordial world would not be able to absorb star power. Who knew how much trouble it would cause? Back then, the demons had only intercepted a portion of the star power of the heavenly cycle, and they had already formed a huge karma with the common people. If the Sea of Laws dared to completely cut off the star power and prevent it from descending into the primordial world, it would not be long before it was crushed by the boundless karma. Such karma. The heavenly Tao did not dare to accept it. Therefore, the power of the stars. It would not be isolated by the Sea of Laws. And Feng Zichen was using this loophole in the Sea of Laws to create void passageways in the resplendent starlight for the human experts to travel between heaven and earth. This kind of thing was actually not difficult. If Feng Zichen went all out, it would only take a few hundred years for him to succeed. But if he really did that, it would cause too much of a commotion. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the entire primordial world would be alarmed. However, this was somewhat inappropriate. After all, Feng Zichen's actions were too unethical. He had just cut off heaven and earth, and now he was opening a back door for the human race. Could it be that the so-called heaven and earth isolation was specially used by the human race to deal with the myriad races? Yes. Although this was the truth, it was obvious that he could not say it out loud. Otherwise, once word got out, what would happen to the human race? Would they be able to stand? The human race could not bear this reputation. As such, it was fine to build passageways for the human race in secret. As long as they didn't do it openly, even if they were discovered, they would just turn a blind eye to it. However, if Feng Zichen dared to expose this matter openly in front of others, it would definitely cause an uproar in the primordial world. At that time, under the uproar of the public, even if the human race was the protagonist of the world, it would be difficult to explain. Of course, the condemnation of others would not hurt the human race in the slightest. However, at the very least, after this matter, the reputation of the human race in the primordial world would be completely ruined. Even Feng Zichen's reputation would be ruined. Feng Zichen still cared about his reputation. The human race also cared about their reputation. In order to care about public opinion, it was better to do such an unethical thing secretly. At most, he would just have to put in more effort. Yes, it was indeed quite troublesome. With Feng Zichen's strength, if he did not hide it and used all his strength, he could complete it in at most 100 years. However, in order not to be discovered by outsiders, he had to divert a portion of his energy to conceal the secrets of heaven. This would undoubtedly greatly delay the progress of the project. It would take at least 100 times more effort. Tens of thousands of years. It was indeed a headache. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, 30,000 years had passed. Feng Zichen's establishment of the heaven and earth passageway in the heavenly temple was finally completed. Only after this period of limelight passed and all living beings stopped talking about the heaven and earth passageway, could these passageways be officially put into use. It was also at this time Emperor Xianxia also ushered in the end of his reign. Yes, after many changes, it was already 900,000 years of Xianxia's reign. Unknowingly, Xianxia had already ruled the primordial world for 900,000 years. It was less than 100,000 years away from the end of his million-year term. At this moment, it was time for him to choose his successor. Thus, Xianxia finally shifted his gaze from the primordial world back to the human race and began to search for the prodigies of his race. After Emperor Xianxia retracted his gaze, the patriarchs of the myriad races could not help but heave a long sigh of relief. In their hearts, this great emperor of the human race was too terrifying. It was fine if he did not make a move, but once he made a move, He cut off the passageway between heaven and earth. It was too terrifying. Even a peerless villain was only a... Xianxia searched the human race several times and finally found a suitable successor. Jijun. That was his nephew, the grandson of Emperor Xiaohao, and the great-grandson of human Emperor Xianyuan. He was born with the imperial purple aura, and his life was indescribably noble. He was the best candidate to succeed the human emperor. Yes, that's right. Jijun was Diku, the reincarnation of one of the 5 innate experts who died in battle for the human race. After confirming the candidate, Emperor Xianxia did not directly entrust him with an important task. Instead, he first gave Diku a test. After he passed all the tests, Emperor Xianxia called him to his side to personally teach him. After that, the primordial world fell into silence again. Nothing major happened. Soon, 100,000 years passed slowly. The human race once again welcomed the change of supreme power. Xianxia had lived for 1,000,000 years. Human Emperor Xianxia passed down the throne to Diku under the witness of the myriad races. Then, he ascended to the sky and left. When he left, many elders of the human race soared into the sky and left with him. At this point, the older generation had completely given up their power and was completely taken over by the younger generation. The change of power in the human race was completed without any ripples. There was no turmoil. However, according to Feng Zichen's estimation, this should be the last time such an uneventful transfer of power would happen. Not everyone could be free from power. People were greedy. After tasting the pleasure of having power, how could they give it up so easily? The reason why they could give up the power in their hands so easily was that they knew that there were greater benefits waiting for them above the heaven realm. Xianxia did not abdicate to live in seclusion. Instead, he went to the heavenly court to be the ruler of heaven and earth. These old officials who assisted Xianxia followed their majesty to the heavenly court. How could Emperor Xianxia treat them unfairly? Compared to the power in the heavenly court, the power in the human race was undoubtedly less important. Therefore, they would happily hand over the power in their hands. They were the 4 batches of old people who had followed Xiaohao, Xianyuan, Shennong, and Fuxi were the same. All of them had a great future ahead of them. However, the benefits of going to the heavenly court to be an official. This was the only time. According to the plan of the 5 heavenly emperors, Emperor Xianxia would be the last heavenly emperor of the human race. After this, even if Hao Tian had not returned, the next human emperor of the human race would not be able to become a heavenly emperor. Because even if Feng Zichen agreed, the other great magicians of the primordial world would not agree. 5 heavenly emperors were enough. With a few more, it would probably become a routine for the human emperor to become a heavenly emperor after he abdicated. At that time, what would Hao Tian do after he returned? He could not give the position of heavenly emperor to the human race, right? This was obviously impossible. Ever since Hao Tian became the heavenly emperor, it was not an exaggeration to say that he had been cautious and conscientious. Not only did he not make a big mistake, he had made a great contribution. Especially when he was forced to enter the cycle of reincarnation because he wanted to save the primordial world. He had fallen to save all living beings in the world. It was fine if all living beings did not appreciate his kindness, but they took advantage of his reincarnation to seize his foundation. TSK. Anyone who had some sense of shame would not be able to do such a thing. Moreover, the heavenly Tao would not allow such a thing to happen. The heavenly Tao was fair. It would not let a hero bleed and then cry. Moreover, the power of the human race. It had already attracted the attention of many great magicians. In order to prevent forces like the shaman and demon race from appearing again, perhaps a group of great magicians would join forces to suppress the human race to curb its development. This was very likely to happen, because no one was willing to have another powerful force like the Lich to surpass them. Once they discovered that any force had such a sign, they would definitely join forces to suppress it. And the human race. Obviously, there were such signs. But at this moment, the human race was protected by the heavenly Tao. Its rise was also carried out according to the will of heaven. Therefore, although the great magicians did not want to see the rise of the human race, they did not dare to interfere too much due to the might of the heavenly Tao. However, the heavenly Tao took care of the human race. There was also a limit. Once this limit was exceeded, the human race would no longer be protected by the heavenly Tao. And obviously, the matter of the 5 heavenly emperors. It was not under the protection of the heavenly Tao. Once the human race had 9 heavenly emperors. Then, the destiny of the human race would completely merge with the destiny of the heavenly court. At that time, in the primordial world, no one could keep the human race in check. However, how could the great divines tolerate such a thing happening right under their noses? They would definitely stop it. The 5 heavenly emperors. It was not the limit of the great magicians. It was the limit of the heavenly Tao. According to the thoughts of the great magicians, one was enough. It was good for you and good for me. However, when Fuxi first ascended the throne, he proposed the plan of the 5 heavenly emperors. Originally, the great magicians did not want to agree. But this move, following the will of heaven, it could help the human race prosper. Therefore, the heavenly Tao agreed. Chapter 650. Even the heavenly Tao agreed. Whether the great divinities agreed or not, it did not seem so important. Thus, the plan of the 5 heavenly emperors was successfully implemented. However, since they had agreed on 5 heavenly emperors, there could only be 5. Not one more. And Xianxia was the 5th heavenly emperor and the last heavenly emperor of the human race. After him, the human emperor. Whether it was the heavenly Tao or the great divinities, they would not let him become the heavenly emperor. Could also be said that the fortune of the human race was over. A new heavenly emperor could no longer be born. In short, in order to prevent the destiny of the human race from completely merging with the destiny of the heavenly court, the heavenly emperor after Xianxia could not be from the human race no matter what. This was the bottom line of the great divinities and the bottom line of the heavenly Tao. And if the human emperor after him could not become the heavenly emperor, then his ministers would not have the benefits of going to the heavenly court to be officials like their predecessors. In this way, would these people still be willing to hand over the power in their hands? Perhaps most people would. But there would always be some people who were greedy for power and could not give up the power in their hands. The human heart could not withstand the test. Therefore, in the future the change of power in the human race might not be as peaceful as today. Chaos was gradually born. In Feng Zichen's eyes, the bloody storm of the change of power in the human race from the future was already reflected. However, although he had expected this scene, he did not make any preparations to prevent this scene from happening. Because Feng Zichen knew that this was inevitable in history. When every race reached this stage, the same situation would happen. It could not be stopped at all. What he could do? He could only watch quietly. As for how to calm these disputes, that was what the human emperor had to face. What did it have to do with him? These troubles. Just treat it as a test for the human emperor. It was not an easy task to become a qualified emperor. Suppressing those who were greedy for power and unwilling to give up power was also a kind of training for the human emperor. Otherwise, if he could not even suppress the old man of the human race, how could he suppress the myriad races? A race could not completely control it. How could he have the face to rule the primordial world? In the center of the primordial world, in the 33 heavens, where the heavenly court was, the great divines of the untainted land gathered here once again to witness the birth of a new celestial emperor. Yes. After Xianxia ascended to heaven, Xiaohao could be considered to have achieved perfection. It was also time to pass the supreme position of heavenly emperor to Xianxia to complete the inheritance of the 5 heavenly emperors. After a series of shocking phenomena, the transfer of power in the heaven court was completed smoothly. The West Heaven Emperor Xiaohao abdicated and was succeeded by the great emperor of the human race, Xianxia. In history, he was known as the Black Emperor, also known as the Mystic Emperor. He was the celestial emperor of the north and had the ancestor sorcerer Gonggong as his guardian. He. 5 celestial emperors. How naive. On the North Star, Feng Zichen looked at the great masters who had left after the banquet ended and couldn't help but sneer in his heart. The thinking of these great divine abilities people was very good. After the 5 celestial emperors, the position of celestial emperor would no longer be fated with the human race. However, the truth was not as simple as they thought. Knowing that the 9 celestial emperors of the human race would benefit immensely, how could Feng Zichen not have a backup plan to facilitate this matter? Those great divine abilities people of the primordial world only saw the 5 emperors of the human race on the surface. But they did not expect that other than the 5 emperors, the human race also had 3 supremes of heaven and earth in the dark. That's right. It was Feng Zichen. And his 2 incarnations. Great Emperor Zhongtian Ziwei. Great Emperor Gaochen Tianhuang. Great Emperor Southern Extremity. A total of 3 supremes of heaven and earth. Even the human emperor was qualified to become a celestial emperor, let alone the 3 supremes of heaven and earth. According to Feng Zichen's plan, after Xianxia abdicated, if Hao Tian still did not return, he would recommend the 4 supremes to temporarily take over the position of celestial emperor to maintain the operation of the primordial world. The 4 supremes took turns. One person ruled the heavenly court for an era. No one could say that it wasn't the case. This was how it should be. The 4 supremes temporarily took over the position of celestial emperor. No matter how one looked at it, it was more suitable than the human emperor becoming the celestial emperor. It was also more in line with the law. To be reasonable. The original intention of the 4 supremes' appearance. It was a supplement to the celestial emperor. Now that the position of celestial emperor was empty, it was reasonable for the 4 supremes to temporarily fill in the vacancy. There were too many unreasonable things about letting the human emperor become the celestial emperor. That was why people found fault with it. What if it were the 4 supremes? Who would dare to find fault with it? Did they want to go against the heavenly Tao? After all, in a sense, the 4 supremes were also a kind of celestial emperor. Back then, the reason why the human emperor was chosen to be the celestial emperor and not the 4 supremes was not because everyone was unwilling, but because the conditions did not support it. What was the situation at that time? At that time, the calamity of the fiend ancestor had just passed. The 2 supremes, Hao Tian and Gaochen, had fallen. The great emperor of the South Pole was seriously injured and had to go into seclusion to recuperate. The Earth Empress was trapped in the netherworld and could not escape. Only the great emperor of Ziwei could barely appear, but he was also seriously injured. With the situation of these 4 supremes at that time, they could not even move freely. How could they take on the role of celestial emperor and maintain the operation of the primordial world? Therefore, letting the human emperor take on the role of celestial emperor became the only choice out of desperation. However, after a change. At that time, the 4 supremes were seriously injured and could not perform the duties of celestial emperor. But today, 5 million years later, their injuries had been recuperated for a long time. Even if they had not fully recovered, they should be more or less healed. Therefore, at this time, it was time for them to shoulder the burden. Enter the heavenly court. Call themselves celestial emperors. Rule the world. The 4 supremes appeared. They wanted to take over the position of celestial emperor. Among the many powerful beings, who dared to say no? Not to mention that the righteousness was in their hands, with the 4 supremes working together, their strength was almost invincible in the primordial world. Even the demon ancestor Rahu could not contend against them. With them. How could they compete with them? If they did not say no, they would be suppressed by the 4 supremes in an instant. Hao Tian was not here. The 4 supremes were in power on behalf of the celestial emperor. This was a matter of course. Outsiders could not interfere. Even if the saint was still here. He couldn't say a single word of no. Therefore, even if they knew that the North Star Emperor was from the human race, those powerful beings could not stop him. Unless they were willing to bear the anger of the 4 supremes. There was only one more celestial emperor. Even with all of them, there were only 6. They were still 3 away from the 9 celestial emperors. 3 celestial emperors were enough. Since that was the case, there was no need to offend the 4 supremes for the position of celestial emperor. Just give it to them. Yes. It was not worth offending the 4 supremes for the position of celestial emperor. It was not the most important 9th supremes. It was fine to give it to them. It was not a problem. But unfortunately, those powerful beings did not know. If they compromised, they would not give 1 celestial emperor, but 3 celestial emperors. The 4 supremes. Read as 4 people. It was the same person. The great emperor of Ziwei, the North Star Emperor, and the great emperor of the South Pole were in one. They were all the same person. This matter was a top secret of the primordial world. Very few people knew about it. There were only 2 or 3 people. Those powerful beings were not familiar with Feng Zichen, so how could they know about this? Therefore, if the plan went smoothly, the powerful beings of the primordial world, he was afraid that Feng Zichen would set him up badly. When the four supremes finished their rotation, there would not be 5 celestial emperors of the human race, but 8. They were only one step away from the extreme 9 supremes. However, according to Feng Zichen's estimation, it would be very difficult for the human race to give birth to a 9th celestial emperor. Because, after the 4 supremes finished their rotation, it was time for Haotian to return from his tribulation. Even if he did not want to return, the heavenly Tao would let him return. How could a dignified celestial emperor be trapped in the cycle of reincarnation? Whose face would he be embarrassing? The primordial world, and even the heavenly Tao's face. After the demonic tribulation, Haotian entered the cycle of reincarnation. While healing his injuries, he also accumulated merit and rightfully took charge of the heavenly court. From this, it could be seen that after his merit was complete, he could return from the tribulation. Then when would Haotian's merit be complete? According to the heavenly Tao, he needed to go through 1,750 great tribulations before he could escape. 1,750 tribulations. Oh my God! This was incredible. Haotian's tribulation was naturally different from others. Every tribulation would take a period of time, which was 129,600 years. Feng Zichen had once calculated for Haotian 1,750 tribulations, and each tribulation was 129,600 years, which added up to 226. 8 million years. 220 million years. It was really a long time. One had to know that the history of the entire human race was not that long. In that case, it might not be obvious. Then from another perspective. From the fall of Haotian until now, it had only been more than 4 million years. TSK. More than 4 million years. Compared to the time that Haotian had to go through, it was not even a fraction of its time. From this it could be seen. 220 million years was a very long time. At first, when Feng Zichen learned about Haotian's situation from the heavenly Tao, he thought that he would not be able to return. 200 million years had passed. Even if he came back, what could he do? The daylily would be cold. However, on second thought, he felt that something was wrong. How could the heavenly Tao let Haotian experience the tribulation for more than 220 million years? Wasn't this destroying his future in disguise? Among them, there must be an unknown plan that could help Haotian return from the tribulation in advance. After a long period of thinking, Feng Zichen still could not figure out the crux of the matter. It was not until hundreds of thousands of years ago, after the separation of heaven and earth, that the space-time of the primordial world changed. Only then did Feng Zichen figure out the arrangement of the heavenly Tao for Haotian. The world of Haotian's reincarnation was not the primordial world at all, but the endless small world floating in the void. In the void. Almost all the time. There were worlds that were either formed or destroyed. These worlds were too weak. Not to mention powerful beings, even ordinary immortals could easily destroy them. Therefore, no one would pay attention to them. In the primordial world, these worlds might only exist for a day before they were destroyed. However, a day in the primordial world was the process of their birth and death for those worlds. It was enough to evolve a complete civilization. The flow of time between worlds was completely different. Some were fast. Some were slow. If Haotian wanted to return, he would need to spend more than 220 million years. During this period of time, it was naturally extremely long in the primordial world. However, if it was placed in those small worlds that were constantly being destroyed, it might not be the case. A day in the primordial world was equivalent to a few years, 100 years, 1,000 years, or even 10,000 years, or 100,000 years in a small world. In short, as long as the heavenly Tao wanted, the so-called 220 million years of time was not a problem at all. It could let Haotian return at any time. As for why until now, the heavenly Tao had not let Haotian return. That was unknown. However, this did not prevent Feng Zichen from using Haotian's absence to perfect his plan and seek earth-shattering benefits for the human race. In Feng Zichen's heart, he very much hoped that Haotian would return as late as possible. He even vaguely hoped that Haotian would never return. That would be best. However, this was obviously impossible. No matter what. After the 4 royals finished their shifts, Haotian had to return. Because this was the final deadline, if Hao Yin still had not returned after this time, the position of Heavenly Emperor would be rotated, and there would be no position for Hao Yin in the primordial world. He had made a great contribution. Not only did he not gain any benefits, he even lost his foundation. This could not be justified no matter what. The Heavenly Tao would never allow this to happen. Those who contributed would be rewarded, those who committed crimes would be punished. It was the foundation of the Heavenly Tao, it would never change. The positions of the 8 Heavenly Emperors was already the limit of Feng Zichen's plan. Of course, he was also very satisfied with this. The bigger the matter, the more difficulties he would encounter. How could such a major event of transforming the supreme power of the primordial world from the public world, the primordial world, to the family world, the human race, be smooth? It should be full of difficulties. If it could be done easily, Feng Zichen would be suspicious. He would feel that there were risks that he did not know about, or that he had fallen into someone's trap. There must be a cause and effect. In this world, there was no such thing as a pie falling from the sky. If there was, there must be an unknown plan inside. In the future, he would definitely pay an unimaginable price for it. So, something that was too easy to succeed. On the contrary, it made people feel uneasy. Feng Zichen still had no idea how to obtain the position of the 9th Heavenly Emperor. However, it did not matter. There was still a long time in the future. There would always be an opportunity. After all, in the eyes of the great magicians of the primordial world, even if Gao Chen ascended to the position of Heavenly Emperor, the human race would only have 6 Heavenly Emperors, not 8. The difference between the 2 Heavenly Emperors, it was enough to make them relax a lot. It could be said that as long as Feng Zichen's disguise was not exposed, the great magicians would not be at their highest vigilance against the human race. Perhaps they could accept the 7th Heavenly Emperor of the human race. After all, in their understanding, the human race had only given birth to 7 Heavenly Emperors, not 9. There was still a gap from the upper limit in their hearts, so it was naturally much easier to accept. Chapter 651. On the contrary, if Feng Zichen's disguise was exposed, the impact of that would undoubtedly be huge. Not to mention how everyone would look at Feng Zichen. After this matter was exposed, they would definitely keep an eye on the human race and would definitely not give them the possibility of a celestial emperor appearing. At that time, the human race would definitely become the target of public criticism and the target of suppression by the great magics. After all, 6 and 8. Those were 2 different concepts. The former gave people a feeling that there was still room for negotiation, while the latter could directly bring people a sense of urgency. The pressure could be imagined. The matter of the celestial emperor. Feng Zichen only thought for a while. Then he withdrew his thoughts and returned to the Emperor Star. Although the matter of the celestial emperor was related to the future of the human race and was extremely important, that was the future. Right now, he had more important things to deal with. That was, he was about to attain the Tao. With Xianxia's ascension to the throne, Feng Zichen was less than 1,000,000 years away from attaining the Tao. Less than 1,000,000 years was not a long time. It was just a period of seclusion. Attaining the Tao was imminent. Feng Zichen was not in the mood to worry about other things. At this moment, there was nothing more important than attaining the Tao. The future of the human race depended on strength. As long as the human race was strong enough, they could do anything they wanted without any scheming. Therefore, having powerful strength was especially important. In these 1,000,000 years, he should abandon everything and focus on cultivation, so that he could improve his state to the most perfect level to welcome the arrival of the general trend of the world. In the blink of an eye, the sea turned into mulberry fields. Just as Feng Zichen was silent in cultivation, 1,000,000 years had passed. The era of the Northern Heavenly Emperor, Jianghu, had quietly come to an end. This also marked the time for Feng Zichen to attain the Tao had finally arrived. In the 1,000,000th year of the Mystic Emperor's calendar, the Northern Black Emperor Jianghu's imperial luck ended. He stepped down from the position of Heavenly Emperor and entered the Fire Cloud Cave to cultivate. The moment he stepped down, there was an inexplicable throbbing in the world. An invisible aura suddenly appeared and swept across the place in the blink of an eye. Then, in front of the shocked gazes of all the great divines, the power of heaven and earth poured down towards the Emperor Star. Feng Zichen, who was in seclusion on the North Star, suddenly felt that something was wrong with the atmosphere. Just as he was about to get up and investigate, he saw a supreme momentum descend upon him. Rumble! The vast momentum of heaven and earth was like a huge funnel, hanging down from the Z-Way star and pouring into Feng Zichen's body through the top of his head. In an instant, as the power of heaven and earth entered his body, Feng Zichen only felt that his heart was empty. His true spirit, origin energy, dermic powers, and flesh began to sublimate. Breakthrough! It had begun. At this moment, with the help of the power of heaven and earth, Feng Zichen's mind began to soar. In a trance, Feng Zichen seemed to have left the primitive world and arrived at a mysterious place. Over there was a vast river. The river of time and space. The most mysterious place in the primordial world. This place was the key to breaking through to the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. It was different from when he had to jump out of the river of fate to become a Daluo. If he wanted to achieve the Tao and reach the realm of the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, the most important step was to gather his own timeline and jump out of the river of time and space. Only by jumping out of the river of time could he transcend heaven and earth and wander outside of time and space. He could observe the primordial world from a bystander's perspective. Why did they say that after becoming a primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, one would be able to obtain great freedom and freedom? That was the reason. There was no trace of you in the river of fate, no trace of you in the river of time and space, and no trace of you could be found in heaven and earth. Everything about you. They were all gathered on his body. Unless you wanted to. Otherwise, under the rules of the heavenly Tao, there would be no such person as you. In this way, he would naturally not be restrained by the heavenly Tao. Of course, he could be said to be free and unfettered. Primordial chaos meant perfection. Primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian had a perfected great Tao. He formed a large world of his own. He was unrestrained and unrestrained. He could walk in the chaos and transcend heaven and earth. Such an existence was no different from the Tao. Therefore, becoming a primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian was known as achieving the Tao. It meant achieving the Tao. Splash! The river of time and space was vast and mighty. It flowed endlessly towards the unknown void as if there was no end. And Feng Zichen? He stood quietly on the river of time and space, looking at the waves on the river with an extremely indifferent gaze. The waves were his past. They were all the traces left behind since he was born until he became a quasi-sage. Under the reflection of the river of time and space, the scenes of his past appeared in his mind one by one. Sigh! What a nostalgic time! Looking at his high-spirited childhood self, Feng Zichen sighed softly and reached out his hand to grab it. The next moment, the river of time and space went berserk. Rumble! Feng Zichen grabbed down with his big hand, and an unparalleled force erupted, setting off a huge storm and endless waves in the river of time and space. Rise! Grabbing the river of time and space, Feng Zichen shouted and suddenly exerted his strength, grabbing a tributary from it. That was the time that belonged to him. Splash! Accompanied by endless waves, a colorful river rose from the river of time and space and was swallowed by Feng Zichen in one gulp. At this point, in the river of time and space, there was no trace of Feng Zichen. If a supreme expert looked down at the river of time and space, he would find that there was no trace of Feng Zichen, whether it was the past, the future, or the present. It was as if this person had completely disappeared from the primordial world. Gathering the timeline in one body, without the past, present, and future, he was primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. At this time, Feng Zichen could already be said to be primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. Whoosh! A huge sense of weightlessness came. Feng Zichen could not help but be absent-minded for a moment. When he came back to his senses and looked back, he found that he had already returned to the Z-Way star. This is it done? After carefully sensing it, Feng Zichen found that his body had undergone an earth-shattering change. Whether it was his origin, his physical body, or his mana, they were undoubtedly much stronger than before. It could be said that, the current him, it would have been easy for him to crush his former self. Achieving the Tao, to him, it was so simple. It was so simple that Feng Zichen thought it was a dream. It was not until a long while later that he was sure that it was true. He had really achieved the Tao. That was right. His situation was different from others. In order to achieve the Tao, He had really prepared too much. Not to mention his identity as the great Taoist priests. Just the vast power of heaven and earth was enough for him to achieve the Tao easily. With such conditions, it was normal for him to achieve the Tao easily. On the contrary, it would be abnormal if the path to achieving the Tao was filled with difficulties. Who asked Feng Zichen to have the advantage? Was it too much? The great Taoist priests, the ancestor of the innate sword Tao, the four gods, the boundless starry sky. First level of the primordial chaos? After sensing his own state, Feng Zichen confirmed his realm. He had barely reached the peak of the first level of the primordial chaos, far from what he had imagined. But it didn't matter, because his foundation had begun to exert force. The power of the stars, come. The power of the innate sword Tao, come. The power of the Pangu god, come. Taking advantage of the fact that the power of heaven and earth had not left, Feng Zichen no longer held back and completely released the restrictions in his body. Immediately, all kinds of supreme powers appeared. They poured into Feng Zichen's body to help him break through his limits and cultivate to a higher realm. Even the power of the great Taoist priests, which was buried deep in his bloodline, was still gushing out. It cultivated his bloodline to speed up his transformation. Whoosh! Without a sound, the Pangu god appeared. No. It was not the Pangu god in the boundless starry sky, but the projection of the Pangu that was formed from the entire primordial world. Just as Feng Zichen was breaking through, he appeared to help Feng Zichen. Rumble! A mysterious and great power appeared and poured into Feng Zichen's body. It constantly baptized his bloodline and body, causing it to constantly move closer to the Pangu Dao body. Apart from that, there was also the power of the connate sword Dao, the power of Zhouxing, the power of the Emperor on the Ziwei star, and more supreme powers. They surged from all over the primordial world to help Feng Zichen transform. Each of these powers was no less than the power of the primordial chaos level. Some of them even reached the level of the late-stage primordial chaos level. Think about it. With so many different attributes but abnormally powerful powers gathered together, once a conflict broke out, what good would happen to Feng Zichen, who was at the center of these powers? He would probably be torn into pieces on the spot. Even if he had already cultivated to the realm of the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, he was no exception. Therefore, facing these powers that swarmed over, Feng Zichen was really afraid. The purpose of summoning these powers was to help him break through, not to let them repel each other and erupt with unparalleled power to tear him into pieces. In that case, although he would not die, however, he had completely lost his face. It would really become the biggest joke in the primordial world. It was not easy for the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian to cultivate to the primordial chaos level, but because he could not control his own power, it caused his power to be unbalanced and he was seriously injured by the backlash. Hiss! Listen, what kind of words was this? If word got out, no matter how thick-skinned Feng Zichen was, he would be ashamed to see others. Therefore, this kind of situation absolutely could not happen. Seeing that these powers were gathering around him and were about to come into contact with each other, Feng Zichen did not hesitate to activate the Hongmeng Daozhong. Hongmeng Daozhong, suppress! As soon as he finished speaking, there was a dang sound. The Hongmeng Daozhong staggered out. A mighty force that could suppress everything suddenly appeared and froze the supreme power that was surging over in place. The Hongmeng Daozhong. Perhaps it was not the strongest magic treasure in the primordial world, but it was definitely the most mysterious magic treasure in the primordial world. His power seemed to be endless, and he could easily do things that other magic treasures could not. Even the level of magic treasures was nothing in front of him. He had the power to break the rules. Especially after the Hongmeng Daozhong was promoted to a connate cardinal treasure, this phenomenon was even more obvious. Therefore, not to mention suppressing the power of the primordial chaos level, even the real primordial Daluo Jingxian could be suppressed by him. Whoosh whoosh, under the suppression of the Hongmeng Daozhong, the power completely calmed down. Like a docile sheep, it was easily absorbed and refined by Feng Zichen. Outside the world, on the projection of Pangu standing above the primordial world, there was an endless Dao rune circulating. Following an inexplicable connection, it flowed into Feng Zichen's heart. That was the profound meaning of Pangu's Dao body. The primordial world had received a lot of favors from Feng Zichen. Therefore, when he was breaking through, Pangu's projection had a reaction and displayed all the mysteries of Pangu's Dao body in front of him to help him condense Pangu's Dao body. This was Pangu's repayment to Feng Zichen. The heavenly Tao would not mistreat those who had contributed, let alone Pangu. The goals that he had been pursuing were now all displayed in front of him. One could imagine the excitement in Feng Zichen's heart. However, compared to before, the current Feng Zichen, his attitude towards Pangu's Tao body had undoubtedly changed greatly. In the past, he had been copying everything. He wished that he could copy all the mysteries of Pangu's Tao body onto himself. Now, he was no longer the ignorant youth from back then. Instead, he was a supreme overlord who shocked the primordial world. His thoughts had been sublimated, and he had a deeper understanding of the Tao. The strongest might not be the best, but what suited him was definitely the best. Although Pangu's Tao body was strong, it still belonged to Pangu. If he completely copied Pangu's Tao body, then his highest achievement in his life would only be to reach the level where Pangu was. Indeed, at the level where Pangu was already the peak that all living beings in the primordial world could not reach. However, how could Feng Zichen, who had Hongmeng Daozhong, be willing to do so? He had even greater ambitions. One had to know that when the Tao of Hongmeng reached the end, it could be compared to the Great Tao. This was a higher level than Pangu. And this was Feng Zichen's goal. He wanted to become an existence that surpassed Pangu. Since that was the case, it was somewhat inappropriate to copy Pangu's Tao body. Therefore, when reversing Pangu's Tao body, Feng Zichen combined the Tao that he cultivated and integrated his own insights. Moreover, regardless of whether he comprehended it or not, he imprinted the runes that represented the Tao of Hongmeng on Hongmeng Daozhong into his own body. He tried to use this method to evolve the legendary Hongmeng's Tao body. Just like that, Feng Zichen's physique had undergone an inexplicable change. Although it was still called Pangu's Tao body. However, it became somewhat specious. He began to gradually walk out of Pangu's influence and create his own path of enlightenment. The path of enlightenment. Just like that. As time passed, Feng Zichen's strength was getting stronger and stronger. From the first level of primordial chaos to the second level of primordial chaos, the third level of primordial chaos, he had been advancing rapidly. And such a big commotion on the Emperor's Star naturally alarmed the great mediums who were in seclusion. Chapter 652. What happened? Is someone about to attain the Tao? In the various grotto heavens and blessed lands of the primordial world, the great divinities who were in seclusion woke up from their enlightenment and looked at the Emperor's Star with bewildered gazes. There was the source of this anomaly. But unfortunately, the result disappointed them. They did not see anything. As far as their eyes could see, it was filled with endless starlight. It was bright and dazzling, covering the entire boundless starry sky and blocking everyone's line of sight, making it impossible to see what was happening inside. The boundless starry sky was Feng Zichen's greatest protection. In it, he could do anything without worrying about being discovered. This was even more obvious after he reshaped the boundless starry sky. In the boundless starry sky, there were Feng Zichen's imprints everywhere, causing his control over the boundless starry sky to reach its peak. Even the powerful heavenly Tao found it difficult to interfere. Therefore, as long as he was willing, then with the vastness of the primordial world, no matter who it was, they would not be able to detect what was happening in the boundless starry sky. This time, if it were not for the fact that Feng Zichen's attainment of the Tao was too great and alarmed the entire primordial world and exceeded the range of the boundless starry sky, this matter would not have been known by the entire world. He reckoned that it would pass by quietly. However, achieving primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian was a huge matter in the primordial world. It was only second to the attainment of the Tao by a saint. The myriad Tao of heaven and earth, the billions of laws, the endless space-time, and so on had to be sensed and sensed. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a grand occasion in the primordial world. Since that was the case, such a huge matter that shocked the primordial world, how could it be hidden from the public? Primordial chaos. That was the supreme Tao fruit. The peak that a cultivator could reach. The phenomenon that was created when it was born was spontaneously formed by heaven and earth. It affected every tributary of the long river of space-time and could not be hidden at all. Unless whose power could be so strong that it could cover the entire long river of space-time. But obviously that was impossible. To be honest, the power of the river of time and space wasn't very strong. Daluo Jingxian could manipulate time and space at will, let alone a great divine power. But at the end of time and space, there was an inconceivably majestic existence. It was his existence that made the river of time and space unshakable. Panga. It was a light name, but it was heavier than Mount Buzhou. It was enough to suppress the entire chaos. Rumble. In the sky above the Emperor Star. Innate Daos gathered together, billions of laws appeared, and boundless Daos spread out, turning this place into a world of Daos. At the same time, Feng Zichen, who was in a state of enlightenment, suddenly looked up to the sky and roared. Ah! Amidst the long roar, a surge of great power rose from Feng Zichen's body. In an instant, it swept through the heavens and the earth, shaking the past, present, and future. Then, a purple river that was more than 3,000 miles long gushed out of Feng Zichen's body, crossing the sky and the earth. Instantly, the world fell silent, a mysterious aura quietly appeared. It constantly merged with the Daos that filled the world, as if they were corroborating each other. Whoosh, whoosh, Daos were merging with each other. An invisible throbbing spread, like the pulse of the world, endless mystery. The purple river that rose from Feng Zichen's body wasn't a real river, but a Dao. If one looked carefully, they would discover that what flowed in the purple river wasn't a drop of river water, but a bright innate rune. This was a long river completely formed by innate runes. The purple light was the light that bloomed from the innate runes. The purple river was vast and mighty. It was only about 3,000 miles long, but it gave off an incomparably huge feeling, as if it had pierced through the entire world. He wasn't a river. He was a Dao. It was Feng Zichen's Dao. It was the Dao that he had been painstakingly cultivating ever since he stepped onto the path of cultivation. Today, when Feng Zichen attained the Dao of primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, the Dao that he had painstakingly cultivated for nearly 10 million years had finally completed its transformation. It turned from illusory to real, and it appeared in the world for the first time in the form of a purple river. 1,000 miles of the Dao was the first heaven of primordial chaos. 3,000 miles of the Dao was the third heaven of primordial chaos. The purple river was vast and mighty, spanning more than 3,000 miles. It meant that Feng Zichen was already at the third heaven of primordial chaos. The length of the purple river was still growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. It could be seen that Feng Zichen's strength had not reached its peak, and there was still room for improvement. The long river flowed quietly, constantly corroborating with the innate Dao and the billions of laws. It was like a crop that had been in a drought for a long time and suddenly encountered a good rain. It crazily absorbed the profound meaning of heaven and earth to become its own nourishment. Gradually, the aura emitted by the long river became more mysterious and ancient. It gave people the feeling that it had existed since ancient times. Walala. In the process of corroborating with heaven and earth, the purple innate runes that formed the long river of the great Dao were also changing. It became even more resplendent. It trembled and jumped in the long river. Sometimes it was arranged together, sometimes it was connected into a large area, as if it was developing a supreme technique. One could see. Traces of supreme divine powers could be seen. They appeared in the long purple river, releasing astonishing fluctuations. As Feng Zichen advanced to the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, his divine abilities also underwent a transformation. They were being reinterpreted, expounding the great Dao from the perspective of the primordial chaos, becoming more perfect and powerful. And all of this together formed Feng Zichen's Dao. It included the innate sword Dao, the Dao of space-time, the Dao of stars, the Dao of reincarnation, and a series of innate Dao supreme great Daos. Huh. What? Great Emperor Ziwei has attained the Dao just like that. Isn't this too fast? In the primordial world, the powerful beings who could vaguely see what had happened from the shocking phenomenon of heaven and earth could not hide the shock in their hearts. They could not help but mutter in a daze. They could not see what was happening in the boundless starry sky, but they were not blind. It was not like they could not see the phenomenon that affected the entire primordial world outside the boundless starry sky. Coincidentally, such a phenomenon. It also made everyone feel that it was particularly familiar. It was just like when Dong Huang attained the Dao. The scene of Dong Huang attaining the Dao was a scene that the powerful beings would never forget in their lives. It was even more profound than the Dao ancestors' unification and the saints' attainment of the Dao. because it was Dong Huang's attainment of the Tao that allowed them to know that their path ahead was not cut off. Above the quasi-saint, it was not just the saint. There was also the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. It was precisely because of this that they remembered the scene of Tai attaining the Tao so vividly. As a result, when they saw the phenomenon that affected the entire primordial world, they were roughly certain that Feng Zichen had attained the Tao. After confirming this, everyone's feelings could be said to be particularly complicated. They felt that they had lived their entire lives in vain. Fast. Too fast. It was really too fast. How many years had it been since the birth of great Emperor Ziwei? It had been less than an eon. And it was in less than an eon that he had achieved what others had not achieved even after spending several eons of time. He had cultivated to the realm of primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, leaving everyone far behind. How could this not be shocking? But while they were shocked, the group of powerful beings felt that this was a matter of course. It seemed that Great Emperor Ziwei attaining the Tao was not something that was unacceptable. It was a matter of course, a matter of course. This contradictory feeling really made the hearts of the great divines feel extremely strange. And the reason why they felt this way was because Feng Zichen's performance was too dazzling. From the moment he appeared and saved the primordial world, Feng Zichen had done too many earth-shattering things along the way. Not to mention the high and mighty primordial chaos Tao Master. More than one of them had fallen at his hands. Even the legendary demon ancestor Rahu had suffered a loss at his hands. Such an existence brought too much shock to everyone, so much so that in the end, everyone was already numb. They thought that no matter how great his achievements were, it was a matter of course. So, after discovering that Feng Zichen had attained the Tao, everyone was shocked, but they also felt that it was a matter of course. They were really shocked to the point of numbness. Compared to Feng Zichen's previous amazing performance, it was not too much of an exaggeration for him to achieve Tao in less than an eon. A few chaos demon gods at the level of primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian had been killed by him. Wasn't it a joke to say that such a figure could not attain the Tao? In the face of such a situation, those great mediums could at most sigh and say, as expected of the orthodox Pangu, a noble existence of the same sect as the heavenly Tao. His cultivation talent is indeed terrifying. That was the end of it. What followed next was endless envy and anticipation. With the second, would the third be far away? After Feng Zichen attained the Tao, the day when they attained the Tao would not be far away. This was not a joke, but a fact. The path of primordial chaos of the great mediums of the primordial world had been completely opened by the remnant spirits of the chaos demon gods that they had devoured. They only needed an opportunity. They could take one step closer and cultivate to the realm that they had always dreamed of. Cultivation was without time. In the blink of an eye, 10,000 years had passed. And Feng Zichen finally woke up from his cultivation. At the same time, this also marked his breakthrough. This time was about to come to an end. Phew! Fourth level primordial chaos? It's a little low. Feng Zichen let out a long breath and said with some dissatisfaction. While he was speaking, behind him, the shadow of a long purple river that spanned more than 4,000 miles was faintly discernible. The great Tao was more than 4,000 miles long. It represented the fourth heaven of primordial chaos. In other words, after converting all his foundations into strength, Feng Zichen became a fourth heaven of primordial chaos expert. The cultivation of the middle stage of primordial chaos was not considered weak even in the entire primordial world. It could not be said. Saint Juan-Ti was at this realm. Logically speaking, Feng Zichen should be satisfied with this strength. But in fact, he was very dissatisfied with his current cultivation. Because, with the help of many supreme forces, he should have broken through to the sixth heaven of primordial chaos in one fell swoop. He should have become a top expert among the saints. But because of an accident, Feng Zichen's dream of the sixth heaven of primordial chaos was completely shattered. And that accident originated from the Hongmeng runes that he engraved into his body. At the beginning of the breakthrough, in order to try to evolve the legendary Hongmeng Dao body, Feng Zichen had once engraved the runes that represented the Hongmeng Dao on Hongmeng Daozhong's body. They were engraved on his body. At that time, he had just had a flash of inspiration and made an attempt. But he did not expect that he would really succeed. The runes that represented the Hongmeng Dao were easily imprinted on his body by him. And as his cultivation broke through, they completely merged into one. At first, when the Hongmeng runes enter his body, Feng Zichen was very excited about it. He thought that it would definitely bring him an astonishing transformation. After all, that was Hongmeng. It was the beginning of everything. But in the end, it undoubtedly disappointed Feng Zichen. After the Hongmeng runes completely merged with him, they did not display any power. Instead, they fell into silence and did not move at all. If he could not clearly sense their existence, Feng Zichen would have thought that they had disappeared. After the Hongmeng runes fell silent, although Feng Zichen was a little disappointed, it did not affect anything overall. It was just a casual move. If it succeeded, he would be happy. If it failed, there was nothing to be sad about. Therefore, after putting this matter down, he focused on breaking through. But unexpectedly, just as he reached the peak of the fourth heaven of primordial chaos and was about to advance to the fifth heaven of primordial chaos, an accident happened. The Hongmeng runes that had fallen into silence suddenly began to move restlessly. They emitted a powerful suction force and crazily devoured Feng Zichen's origin. This sudden turn of events really gave Feng Zichen a fright. Almost without hesitation, he mobilized the power in his body and tried to suppress the rioting Hongmeng runes. However, no matter what method he used, even if he used the Hongmeng Daozhong, he could not suppress the Hongmeng runes. Seeing that his origin was being absorbed by the Hongmeng runes at a speed visible to the naked eye, Feng Zichen really wanted to completely cut it out of his body. However, the Hongmeng runes had completely merged with him. If he cut it out, it would definitely shake his Dao foundation. For a moment, Feng Zichen hesitated. The loss of the origin could be slowly made up. It would just take a little more time. However, if the Dao foundation was shaken, it would hurt the foundation and affect the future path of Dao. As the saying goes, the lesser of two evils. In this way, how to choose between the two? Wasn't it obvious? Therefore, Feng Zichen gritted his teeth. He allowed the Hongmeng runes to devour his origin. Let him devour. With the boundless starry sky and Panga's projection as his backing, what Feng Zichen did not lack the most was the innate origin. He did not believe that a mere Hongmeng rune could suck him dry. Of course. Just for this reason. It was not worth Feng Zichen to make up his mind. What really made him make up his mind was that he saw the possibility of approaching the Hongmeng Dao from the changes in the Hongmeng runes. Speaking of which, ever since Feng Zichen had mastered the Hongmeng Daozhong, he had tried all means, but he had never been able to comprehend the mystery of the Hongmeng Dao. It was as if he had no fate with the Hongmeng Dao. Chapter 653. Gradually. This matter was about to become Feng Zichen's sore point. If he could not comprehend the way of Hongmeng, he would not be able to completely refine Hongmeng Daozhong. This meant that Hongmeng Daozhong could leave him at any time. This made Feng Zichen very uneasy. It could be said that he was able to achieve what he had today, mainly because of Hongmeng Daozhong. Although it was partly due to his hard work, it was far from being comparable to the role played by Hongmeng Daozhong. In the primordial world, there were many people who worked hard. There were also people who worked harder than Feng Zichen. Why didn't others achieve so much? Not to mention anything else. Let's talk about the great magicians of the primordial world. Could it be that they didn't work hard enough? They had persisted in cultivating for hundreds of millions of years without relaxing. It could be said that they worked hard enough. But what about the achievements they had achieved? It was far from as high as Feng Zichen. And all of this was brought by Hongmeng Daozhong. It could be said that there was no Hongmeng Daozhong. There was no Feng Zichen today. Therefore, in Feng Zichen's heart, he naturally valued Hongmeng Daozhong very much. He did not want him to be lost in his hands. Although with his current strength, even without Hongmeng Daozhong, he could still dominate the primordial world and pursue a higher realm. However, the existence of Hongmeng Daozhong would undoubtedly allow him to take fewer detours, reduce a lot of risks, and cultivate to a higher realm faster. Therefore, this treasure could not be lost. And a treasure like Hongmeng Daozhong, in his own hands, it was better than in the hands of others, right? Hongmeng Daozhong had transformed into a primordial treasure in his hands. It must not be taken away by outsiders and become a wedding dress for them. It was because he was worried about Hongmeng Daozhong that Feng Zichen ignored his own safety when the Hongmeng runes mutated and allowed them to devour his innate origin. This was the first time he had seen the Hongmeng runes change. Therefore, no matter the outcome, he would let it continue to change. Because this might be the only opportunity for him to peek into the mysteries of Hongmeng's Dao. There was movement. It was better than nothing. If the Hongmeng runes continued to remain dormant, Feng Zichen did not know when he would be able to see the mysteries of the Hongmeng Dao. And there was movement. This represented an opportunity. This was like a huge gamble. He won. They would be able to comprehend the mysteries of the Hongmeng Dao and obtain endless opportunities. He lost. Although his life would not be in danger, his strength would be greatly reduced due to the fall of his source energy. But Feng Zichen did not care anymore. With the boundless starry sky and Panga's projection behind him, no matter how much source energy he lost, he could make up for it in an extremely short period of time. So, he could afford to gamble. Moreover, he might not lose. Faintly, Feng Zichen had a feeling. The mutation of the Hongmeng runes should be a good thing for him. After all, the Hongmeng runes had already merged with him. The two of them were bound together for good and ill, harming him. Not only would the Hongmeng runes not gain any benefits, but they would also pay an unimaginable price. Just like that, time ticked by, second by second. In the blink of an eye, it was 10,000 years later. At this time, the Hongmeng runes seemed to have eaten their fill. They stopped devouring Feng Zichen's source and retracted into their bodies. They lay there quietly, motionless. As the Hongmeng runes regained their calm, Feng Zichen also woke up. He had to wake up. His breakthrough had come to an end. He could no longer support his breakthrough. Fourth heaven of primordial chaos. This was Feng Zichen's current realm. Originally, he should have reached the sixth heaven of primordial chaos. Unfortunately, thanks to the help of the Hongmeng runes, they devoured the source that he used to break through, leaving him at the fourth heaven of primordial chaos. This was also a blessing in disguise. At the very least, he still maintained the cultivation of the fourth heaven of primordial chaos. He did not fall, did he? According to the devouring speed of the Hongmeng runes at that time, Feng Zichen was really afraid that his strength would fall. Is this Hongmeng? Feng Zichen, who woke up from his enlightenment, said in a daze. The price of 2 heavens was not in vain. After the Hongmeng runes devoured the source, they also gave Feng Zichen some information about the Hongmeng Dao. Although this information was still somewhat obscure and difficult to understand, it was much better than not understanding anything before. In Hongmeng Daozhong, with the help of the creation jade disc fragment, Feng Zichen finally sorted out some clues from this information and comprehended a trace of the mystery of the Hongmeng Dao. Don't underestimate this trace of comprehension. As the saying goes, everything was difficult at the beginning. But as long as he started, the next step was not so difficult. Comprehending a trace of the mystery of the Hongmeng Dao was equivalent to entering the door. Next, with the help of Hongmeng Daozhong, sooner or later, Feng Zichen would be able to completely comprehend the Hongmeng Dao. Moreover, the Hongmeng runes in his body. Since the first change could happen, then there would definitely be a second change, a third change, a fourth change. And this would be the best help for Feng Zichen to comprehend the Hongmeng Dao. My Dao has been completed. After comprehending the Hongmeng Dao, Feng Zichen's heart was abnormally excited. Even the unhappiness of not reaching his realm had been diluted a lot. If his realm was not enough, he could slowly increase it. But there were not many opportunities to comprehend the Hongmeng Dao. If he missed it, who knew if there would be a next time? As soon as he comprehended the primordial Dao, Feng Zichen could not wait to cultivate it. Soon, he was lost in the boundless Taoist rhyme. Then, he was woken up by Hongmeng Daozhong. The most difficult thing about cultivating the Hongmeng Dao was that if one was not careful, there was a danger of being assimilated by the Hongmeng Dao. Hongmeng, the beginning of being. Anything that existed, whether it was a person or an object, originated from him. Therefore, he had the ability to assimilate all things. The most powerful part of the Hongmeng Dao was also the most dangerous part of him. Therefore, one needed to be extremely careful when cultivating this Dao. But Feng Zichen was not an exception. Because he had Hongmeng Daozhong. With the help of Hongmeng Daozhong, he could pull Feng Zichen back from the crisis of Hongmeng's assimilation at any time. This was the reason why Feng Zichen was confident that he could cultivate the Hongmeng Dao. Fourth level of primordial chaos? It's still a little low. Looks like I still have to give it a try. After the initial excitement, the unwillingness of not reaching his realm as expected once again surfaced in Feng Zichen's heart. For this, he planned to give it a try. He would continue to improve his realm. And in the primordial world, he had already used up all the power that he could use to improve his realm. There was no other power that could help him. So, Feng Zichen turned his gaze. He placed it in the chaos outside the realm. He remembered. In addition to being the great Emperor Ziwei of the primordial world, he also had another identity in the chaos outside the realm. A creature of chaos, the Panga Zichen clan. This was back then. When he attained the Tao of Daluo Jingxian in the chaos outside the realm, the great Tao personally gave him an identity. For this, he also received a reward from the great Tao, a supreme-grade innate spirit treasure, the first origin Tao talisman, as a protective spirit treasure. And Feng Zichen was able to gather his timeline so smoothly in the river of time and space partly because of his Tao attainment in the chaos outside the realm. There was no concept of time and space in the chaos outside the realm. Therefore, when Feng Zichen successfully attained his Tao in the chaos outside the realm, there was no future for him in the primordial world. The past was constant and could be easily cut off. However, the future was fleeting and unpredictable. It was constantly changing, causing one to be unable to see through it or grasp it. Therefore, the future was the most difficult to cut off. However, Feng Zichen had no future. This saved him the most difficult step. He easily gathered his timeline, jumped out of the river of time and space, and wandered outside the world. Imagine attaining the Tao in the chaos outside the realm. There were such great benefits. If he attained the Tao in the chaos outside the realm, wouldn't the benefits be even greater? Thinking about it, Feng Zichen was excited. He felt that he could give it a try. As for failure, he had never considered it. His Tao. It had already exceeded the scope of the Tao of stars. It was all-encompassing and all-encompassing. It was gradually approaching the Tao of Hongmeng. Its power was no weaker than the great Tao cultivated by the Chaos Fiend God. Since that was the case, how could it fail? After making up his mind, Feng Zichen immediately took action. He first looked at the outside world and found that the phenomenon of his Tao attainment had yet to dissipate. At that moment, he secretly activated the power of Panga's projection, and secretly interfered with the phenomenon of heaven and earth to prolong its existence so as to hide the fact that he was not in the primordial world. After doing all this, Feng Zichen immediately released his spiritual will and crossed endless time and space to establish contact with the chaos bead hidden in the human Tao Emperor's seal. Then, his figure flashed. He disappeared on the spot. He came to the chaos bead. And no one noticed all of this. Not to mention the fact that the boundless starry sky blocked everything. Feng Zichen's current cultivation base was at the 4th level of primordial chaos. He could already make it so that no one could discover his tracks. Let's go! Inside the chaos bead, Feng Zichen waved his hand and opened the space-time door. With a step, he left the primordial world and arrived in the chaos outside the realm. Rumble! After many years, Feng Zichen had already undergone earth-shaking changes, but the chaos outside the realm was the same as before. Loneliness, emptiness, chaos, and the endless tyrannical chaos aura were always the theme of the chaos. Hiss! No wonder the Chaos Fiend God is so powerful. In such a harsh situation, if one is not strong enough, they will not be able to survive at all. Every time Feng Zichen came to the chaos outside the realm, he could not help but sigh at the environment here. It was really too harsh. The Daluo Jingxian of the primordial world was here. It would not be long before it was completely destroyed. The worse the environment, the more powerful the existence born. After sighing, Feng Zichen removed the protection and stepped into the realm of the chaos outside the realm. When he first stepped into the realm of chaos, not only did he not feel uncomfortable as he expected, but it gave Feng Zichen a comfortable feeling like a fish in water, as if he had returned to his mother's embrace. This surprised him. Rumble! Just as Feng Zichen was surprised, he seemed to sense a strange aura. The surrounding chaos aura suddenly became restless and swarmed toward him, wanting to devour him. Humph! Displeased, Feng Zichen was about to take action to suppress the chaos aura that was surging over when he saw a mysterious divine light blooming from his body. Shua, wherever the divine light shone, the restless chaos aura seemed to be tamed and floated obediently beside Feng Zichen. This is... In a trance, Feng Zichen seemed to understand something and reached out to touch his eyebrows. There, he did not know when, suddenly, a mysterious imprint appeared on it. And that mysterious divine light was emitted from this mark. Zichen mark. It was the name of the mark. At the same time, it was also the symbol of Feng Zichen's identity as a chaos creature. This was the mark of life that the great Tao gave to Feng Zichen. It was his real name. It could also be said to be the name of a god. It's been a long time since I've been to the chaos outside the realm. I forgot that as a chaos creature, how could I be afraid of a mere chaos aura? They should be the ones who should be afraid. With a chuckle, Feng Zichen opened his mouth and inhaled fiercely. He actually swallowed all the chaos aura that hovered around him. This is the real chaos aura. The power contained in it is many times richer than the chaos aura in the chaos outside the realm. Smacking his lips, Feng Zichen said with some emotion. After his strength reached the realm of primordial chaos, the connate aura could no longer meet his daily needs for cultivation. Only the chaos aura could allow him to continue to improve. However, after the chaos aura of the primordial world was filtered by the sky curtain, although the danger was greatly reduced, the power contained in it was undoubtedly weakened by a lot. It was far from being comparable to the pure chaos aura in the chaos outside the realm. It was no exaggeration to say that cultivating here for a day was better than cultivating in the primordial world for a year. It's time to find an opportunity to take back the chaos bead. Thinking of the benefits of cultivating in the chaos outside the realm, Feng Zichen decided to take back the chaos bead to make it easier for him to cultivate here. Originally, even if this didn't happen, he would have taken back the human Tao Emperor seal after the 5 emperors. A connate treasure. How could it always be in the hands of others? Forget it. Business is more important. Let's achieve the Tao first. Knowing that his time was limited, Feng Zichen didn't delay any longer and decided to achieve the Tao first. Rumble. A long purple river of more than 4,000 miles surged out of Feng Zichen's body in a mighty manner. Following the connection between them, it rumbled toward the origin of chaos. There was the mark left behind by Feng Zichen when he attained the Tao. Just as Feng Zichen had thought, his attainment of the Tao this time was very smooth. His great Tao was easily imprinted on the origin of chaos and existed with it. Just like last time, as Feng Zichen imprinted his great Tao on the origin of chaos, the great Tao in the unseen world immediately reacted. Wisps of mysterious power hung down and gathered the chaos aura in all directions, turning into a huge furnace of the great Tao. It enveloped Feng Zichen and slowly refined him. This was the great Tao personally helping him to be reborn and reconstruct his Tao body with supreme power. Chapter 654. Just like when Feng Zichen broke through to Daluo Jingxian, the great Tao personally cleansed his origin and helped him transform into a chaos creature. This time, when Feng Zichen broke through to primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, he received the same experience in the great Tao. Perhaps, with this opportunity, he could transform into a chaos demon god in one fell swoop. Of course, this was just a thought. How could a chaos demon god be so easy to become? Who knew how many years had passed since the birth of chaos? And this vast chaos had only given birth to 3,000 chaos demon gods. If Feng Zichen only relied on one baptism of the great Tao to transform into the high and mighty chaos demon god, wouldn't that make the chaos demon god look bad? That's all I, the great chaos demon god, am? That's all? If the chaos demon god really had no face, how could he be called the greatest life in the world? Therefore, the birth of every chaos demon god consumed the luck and creation of the chaos. It was not so easy to achieve. 1 or 2 baptisms of the great Tao could not make Feng Zichen transform into a chaos demon god. At most, it could only make him closer to such an existence. After all, the chaos demon god was different from the innate god fiends. They were the true seeds of the great Tao, and each of them had the possibility of achieving eternity. Boundless pain assaulted him, causing Feng Zichen to gasp uncontrollably. This was the price of baptizing his body. The pain went straight to the depths of his soul, and it was impossible to avoid. However, Feng Zichen's realm was high, and his endurance had greatly increased. After the initial discomfort, he began to get used to this pain. Then, he could not feel the pain. It seemed that it was just that. After not feeling the pain, Feng Zichen relaxed a lot. Then he began to do business. Great Tao furnace out. Feng Zichen's mind moved, and a huge furnace flew out of his body and hung in the air, echoing with the Great Tao furnace in the outside world. This was a supreme great magical power that he had created by imitating the Great Path Furnace, pseudo. Since he had nothing to do, he might as well take this opportunity to transform his divine ability. Originally, the power of the Great Tao Furnace was very strong. It was enough to rank at the top of the countless great divine powers in the untainted land. Then, after confirming with the Great Path once again, its power would definitely be further enhanced. Who knows? He might be able to enter the top 3 and become one of the strongest supreme mystical skills of the Great Desolate Aeon. In the chaos, time passed unknowingly. Under the baptism of the furnace of the Great Path, Feng Zichen did not know how much time had passed. It felt like an instant, yet it also felt like thousands of years. In short, in a daze, Feng Zichen finished his transformation. The Great Tao came suddenly and left suddenly. The moment Feng Zichen completed his transformation, all the strange phenomena disappeared without any warning. Only Feng Zichen was left behind. He stood in the chaos, stunned. That's it. In the chaos, Feng Zichen muttered in a daze. It was no wonder that he was like this. In the early stages of the baptism, he had indeed tasted unimaginable pain. But after the baptism reached the later stages, everything was different. The Great Tao seemed to have released its restrictions on him. All kinds of mysteries appeared in front of his eyes without any concealment, allowing him to swim freely in the ocean of the Great Tao. Unknowingly, Feng Zichen was immersed in it. Therefore, after the Great Tao left, he suddenly woke up from his enlightenment and could not accept the feeling of difference for a moment. That was why he sighed as if he had not had enough. If I could stay under those conditions, why would I worry about not being able to reach the limitless Great Tao? After calming down, Feng Zichen shook his head and said. Then, he began to sense his own condition. Because he had fallen into the deepest level of enlightenment, his mind was completely immersed in the Great Tao. He did not have any extra mind to pay attention to his body. This was what was often said. Apart from the Tao, there was nothing else. For this reason, during the enlightenment period, Feng Zichen's body operated instinctively. He really did not know what kind of changes had happened. He needed to feel it carefully. Fifth heaven of primordial chaos? The moment his mind returned to its original position, all kinds of information naturally poured into Feng Zichen's mind, allowing him to understand all the changes. Among them, the most eye-catching thing was, it was his cultivation level. Fifth heaven of primordial chaos. He was one step closer to the fourth heaven of primordial chaos. It still did not satisfy Feng Zichen. That's right. The Great Tao had personally taken action. Logically speaking, it should not be so shameful. Even if it did not raise Feng Zichen's realm by 5 or 6 levels, it should have raised it by 2 or 3 levels. Only then would it be in line with the identity of the Great Tao. But in the current situation, how should he put it? The performance of the Great Tao was indeed not worthy of his identity. He had only raised his cultivation level by 1 level. If word got out, Feng Zichen felt embarrassed for the Great Tao. Where was the face of the Great Tao? This time, it was all gone. At the very least, the Great Tao's impression in Feng Zi's heart plummeted. Although this was useless. After complaining about the realm, Feng Zichen looked at the Hongmeng runes. After all, to him, this was the most important thing. After calming his mind, Feng Zichen focused his attention on the Hongmeng runes. Immediately, he had a different feeling. The power of Hongmeng. He felt the power of Hongmeng. No, to be precise, he had mastered part of Hongmeng's power. In Feng Zichen's body, the mysterious Hongmeng runes were no longer silent. Instead, they became abnormally active. They came to Feng Zichen's divine sea and trembled inexplicably. They emitted wisps of mysterious power and began to temper Feng Zichen's magic power. After being tempered by the Hongmeng runes, Feng Zichen's magic power condensed from starlight actually inherited some characteristics of the Hongmeng qi. For example, it assimilated everything. In itself, the Ziwei star power in Feng Zichen's body could be said to be domineering and peerless. It had the power to destroy all laws. Now, in addition to the Hongmeng qi's ability to assimilate everything, it had become even more domineering. That's right. The power of the Hongmeng qi and the power of the Ziwei star power not only did not cancel each other out. Instead, they strangely merged into one and turned into an even more powerful force. Not to mention that it could destroy all laws. It even showed signs of destroying everything. It could even destroy the power of the Tao. Go! Subconsciously, Feng Zichen mobilized the magic power in his body and threw a punch forward. However, a dragon's roar sounded, and then an endless purple aura erupted. It moved forward in a mighty manner, as if it was going to sweep everything away. Rumble! The surrounding chaos shook as a result. Wherever that purple stream of air passed, the surrounding chaotic aura would rapidly melt away like snow encountering the blazing sun. No. It was not melted. It was assimilated by it. It became a part of the purple aura. After a long time, the wave that erupted in the chaos finally subsided. Looking in the direction of Feng Zichen's punch, the chaos aura could no longer be seen. It was empty, forming a huge passage. And the surrounding chaos aura did not make up for it. Hiss! So powerful! Even Feng Zichen was shocked by the power of the attack. If he had this ability before, even if he did not rely on external forces, he, who was only a half-step primordial chaos realm, would dare to directly challenge the real primordial chaos Tao Master, an existence specially created by Daluo Jingxian who had just entered the primordial chaos realm. No wonder even the great Tao personally made a move, but my realm only increased by one level. So this is the problem. At this time, Feng Zichen finally understood why his realm only increased by one level. It turned out that the extra power had been devoured by the Hongmeng runes. The Hongmeng runes would not change for no reason, and the only thing that could change them now was the power of the great Tao. Combined with Feng Zichen's current situation, wasn't the answer very obvious? The Hongmeng runes must have been used by the great Tao to increase the power of Feng Zichen's realm, which was why there was such a huge change. Was it worth it? Of course it was worth it. Mastering the power of Hongmeng gave Feng Zichen the capital to fight above his level. This was something that could not be brought about by the increase of his realm. One had to know. At the end of the realm, without the help of external forces, it was very difficult for the previous situation of fighting above his level to happen. Those who could reach the primordial chaos realm, which one of them was not a stunning genius? Each of them had left their own legends in the history of cultivation. Such a figure. Who would be worse than who? Fighting above his level, it was impossible to think about it. After mastering the Hongmeng runes, Feng Zichen had this possibility. How could this not be exciting? If his realm was low, he could slowly increase it. But once this opportunity was missed, it would really be gone. TSK, TSK, TSK. It had to be said. The Great Tao was the Great Tao. Its power was much higher than the power of the primordial world. Feng Zichen had paid so much in the primordial world, but it only made the Hongmeng runes react. But once the Great Tao made its move, it directly made the Hongmeng runes completely recover. This was the difference. Ziwei Emperor Qi. From now on, you'll be called Ziwei Emperor Qi. After sighing, Feng Zichen gave the power in his body a name. Ziwei Emperor Qi. Ziwei was the symbol of his identity. Emperor was simple. As the name implied, it meant the great emperor. Qi, needless to say, referred to power here. The combination of Ziwei Emperor Qi meant that it was the power of Ziwei the Great. It was also narcissistic. After confirming the realm and the changes in the Hongmeng runes, Feng Zichen turned his gaze to the changes in his body. Speaking of which, the changes in his body were the greatest. After all, this was the goal of the Great Tao's transformation. Compared to before, the origin has improved a lot. It's more perfect and more in line with the Great Tao. It's just that there's still a long way to go before I become a chaos demon god. After feeling it, Feng Zichen said. Overall, he was very satisfied with the changes in his body. Although he did not succeed in becoming a chaos demon god, he was very close and had the possibility of becoming a chaos demon god. Perhaps, if he continued to transform like this, when Feng Zichen's cultivation reached the 12th level of the perfected primordial chaos, he would be able to transform into a true chaos demon god in one fell swoop. Perhaps the perfected primordial chaos realm was not enough. But when Feng Zichen reached the limitless Daluo Jingxian, he would definitely be able to transform into a chaos demon god. He had the confidence. He also had the confidence. However, after this transformation, even if Feng Zichen did not transform into a chaos demon god, with his current background, it was enough to enter the top 3 of the primordial world. Even Lian Sanqing, in terms of background, could not compare to him. Moreover, the path of the god fiend mainly cultivated the physical body. Since Feng Zichen had achieved the Tao with the path of the god fiend, it meant that his physical body was very powerful. He had already cultivated the Panga's Tao body, specious but not. Its hardness was not inferior to a primordial treasure at all. Even if Di Jiang was reborn and Huta came in person, she did not dare to say that she was better than Feng Zichen in terms of physical body. With the size of the primordial world, it was estimated that only the demon ancestor Rahu. Only then would he be able to surpass Feng Zichen in terms of physical strength. He could not be called the first in the primordial world, but he could definitely be called the top 3 in the primordial world. Strong. Very strong. The current Feng Zichen could be said to be truly standing at the top of the primordial world, becoming the small group of people standing at the top, able to dominate the fate of all living beings. The rise and fall of heaven and earth were all in his hands. From this moment on, he had completely gotten rid of the fate of a chess piece and became the next person on the chessboard called Heaven and Earth. From behind the scenes, he walked to the front of the stage. With Feng Zichen's cultivation of the 5th level of primordial chaos, there were not many people stronger than him in the primordial world. There were only a handful. Even the 7 saints. Their strongest person's strength would not exceed the 6th level of primordial chaos. It could be said that the current Feng Zichen could completely do whatever he wanted in the primordial world. Daluo Jingxian, who had reached primordial chaos, already had the capital to flip the table with the heavenly Tao. And this was the capital to roam the world. On this trip to chaos, Feng Zichen could be said to have gained a lot. His strength had increased too much. In one fell swoop, he had become one of the top 10 experts of the primordial world. There were only 10 primordial chaos experts alive now. 7 saints, Tao ancestor, demon ancestor, Feng Zichen. Now that he thought about it, every time Feng Zichen came to the great chaos outside the realm, he would be able to obtain unimaginable gains. The great chaos outside the realm. It could be said to be his blessed land. His road to rise. It was here that the foundation was laid. In the future, if there was nothing, he should come here more often. After all, this was his blessed land. If he walked a few more times, he might be able to find some other opportunities. This trip to the chaos outside the realm, he had gained so much. Feng Zichen was generally satisfied. However, it wasn't as if there were no regrets. This time, because he had not become a chaos fiend god. The great Tao did not bestow a magic treasure as his lifelong spiritual treasure like before. This was Feng Zichen's greatest regret. Back then, he only became a creature of chaos. The great Tao gave him a supreme grade innate spirit treasure. Then if he became a chaos fiend god, wouldn't a magic treasure bestowed by the great Tao be even better? One had to know that every chaos fiend god had a chaos spirit treasure. Without a chaos spirit treasure, Feng Zichen would naturally feel very regretful. However, it didn't matter. This chaos spirit treasure, he would get it sooner or later. He would treat it as a temporary deposit in the hands of the great Tao, and keep it for him for a period of time. The attainment of the Tao is over. The next chapter is back to the primordial world. Chapter 655. It's about time. It's time to return to the primordial world. After erasing the aura of chaos on his body, Feng Zichen stepped into the space-time door and returned to the primordial world. Although the chaos was good, but his foundation, and the people he could not bear to part with, they were all in the primordial world. In the blink of an eye, space-time changed. Looking back again, Feng Zichen had already returned to the Emperor Star. At this moment, only 3,000 years had passed since he left the primordial world. Well, it was just a short moment. And this, of course, was not because Feng Zichen was lucky. One had to know. Because the chaos did not have space-time, one could not feel the passage of time there. Therefore, if one was not careful, one might think that one had only stayed in the chaos for a moment, but in fact, tens of thousands of years or even hundreds of thousands of years had passed in the primordial world. Of course, it was also possible that one had spent tens of thousands of years in the chaos, and only an instant had passed in the primordial world. All of this depended on one's luck. To be honest, Feng Zichen's luck could be said to be extremely good. But there was always a possibility. What if his luck was useless in the chaos? So, he did not dare to gamble on this probability. If he was delayed in the chaos for hundreds of thousands of years, then it would be too late. For this, after Feng Zichen entered the chaos, he used the chaos bead to stabilize the chaos and make the flow of time consistent with the primordial world. In this way, no matter how many years had passed in the primordial world, no matter how many years had passed in the chaos realm, the reason why Feng Zichen could return after 3,000 years was because of this. Otherwise, who knew what time and space the time node was when he returned? Feng Zichen's age was already past the time to gamble on luck. The current him was focused on planning before acting. Without sufficient preparation, how could he let himself take the initiative to put himself in an unknown situation? That was not only irresponsible to himself. It was also irresponsible to the forces behind him and the people who cared about him. Feng Zichen. He was no longer a loner. He had a wife. He also had clansmen. He had friends. 3,000 years. In addition to the 10,000 years before that, that's a total of 13,000 years. That's not a short time. It's time to go out. If we don't go out now, it will arouse suspicion. After returning to Emperor Micro Star, Feng Zichen estimated the time that had passed and felt that it had been a bit too long. He didn't have time to rest and immediately removed the Tao attainment phenomenon. Outside, there was still a large group of powerful beings waiting. Indeed, they did not know how long it would take to attain the Tao. Therefore, it was reasonable to say that Feng Zichen could come out whenever he wanted. But don't forget, there would also be a day when these great beings would attain the Tao. If that day really came, and they remembered what happened today, he only needed to compare it with the time he attained Tao to know that something was amiss. This would bring unnecessary trouble to Feng Zichen. In order to prevent such a situation from happening, Feng Zichen still had to put on a full show. He had to remove the phenomenon of heaven and earth in time to announce to the world that he had successfully reached the realm of primordial chaos Xianxia. Rumble. As the phenomenon of heaven and earth disappeared, a vast fluctuation suddenly spread out from Emperor Micro Star. In an instant, it swept through the entire primordial world. At that moment, heaven and earth seemed to have stopped. After that, heaven and earth returned to normal. However, the living beings of the primordial world had already unknowingly prostrated themselves in the direction of Emperor Micro Star. That was Feng Zichen releasing his aura to announce to the world that after Donghuang Tai, the new primordial chaos Xianxia was born. Of course, in order to keep a trump card, and also to prevent scaring others, Feng Zichen only displayed the cultivation base of the third heaven of primordial chaos to the outside world, not the fifth heaven of primordial chaos. Once he attained the Tao, he would be at the fifth heaven. If word got out, it would be like a myth. It was indeed a little scary. It was better to keep a low profile. At the same time, he could also trick a group of people at the critical moment. The moment Feng Zichen's aura rose, everyone knew that Great Emperor Micro Star had successfully attained the Tao. In this primordial world, another supreme expert was added to the mix. Suppressing the restlessness in their hearts and restraining the envy in their eyes, the group of great mediums walked out of their cave abodes one after another and headed outside the boundless starry sky to congratulate Feng Zichen for successfully breaking through to primordial chaos Xianxia. It was no exaggeration to say, the congratulations of everyone came from the bottom of their hearts, because they were all the beneficiaries of Feng Zichen's Tao attainment this time. In the primordial world, there was no such thing. When one person attained the Tao, he suppressed the situation where everyone else could not attain the Tao. In fact, the situation in the primordial world was exactly the opposite. The more people attained the Tao, the easier it was for the people after that to attain the Tao. In the primordial world, above Daluo Jingxian, there was actually no path left. Daluo Jingxian was already at the end of the Tao. But unfortunately, there were many capable people in the primordial world who forcefully broke the limit and walked a path above Daluo Jingxian. This was the origin of primordial chaos, and the new realm had just appeared. There were definitely many imperfections. This required generations of people to work hard to perfect it. And every time there was an additional primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, the new realm would be perfected a little, and future generations would be able to take fewer detours. Attaining the Tao would also become easier. In this way, everyone had received benefits from Feng Zichen. Even if they did not accept his kindness, they would not speak ill of him. It was just a few words of congratulations. It was not like they would lose a piece of meat if they said it. How could it be compared to the benefits they had received? On the Emperor's Star, Feng Zichen saw that everyone was rushing towards the boundless starry sky. It was not good for him to continue sitting down. He quickly got up and went out to welcome them. Poor Wei and the others congratulate Your Majesty on attaining the Tao and enjoying the limitless Tao fruit. Your Majesty attaining the primordial chaos Tao fruit is equivalent to breaking free from the cage of heaven and earth. From now on, you will be free and unrestrained. You are really envious of others. When everyone saw Feng Zichen walk out, they all went forward to congratulate him. Fellow Taoists, you are too polite. The Emperor's Star is just one step ahead. I think that with your strength, it won't be long before you can take that crucial step and become a primordial chaos Tao realm like me. Waving his hand, Feng Zichen also smiled and congratulated everyone. Just like that. Both sides spoke one after another. Outside the boundless starry sky, they flattered each other. During this period, Feng Zichen did not mention anything about letting everyone enter the boundless starry sky for a chat. As for the crowd, they did not find this strange at all. He did not let everyone enter the boundless starry sky. It was not because there was some secret in the boundless starry sky that could not be discovered by others. It was because there were too many great mediums. If there were 3 or 4, it was fine for Feng Zichen to let them in. But basically all the great mediums of the primordial world had come. How could Feng Zichen dare to let them all in at once? Who knew? Among these great mediums, how many spies of the Chaos Fiend God were there? If they took the opportunity to cause trouble, that would be terrible. In the boundless starry sky, there were 4 great ferocious beasts suppressed. If any one of them was let go, it would be a great disaster for the primordial world. Therefore, Feng Zichen could not gamble. Since he could not determine which group of people were the spies of the Chaos Fiend God, he might as well not let them in. Without a doubt, there must be spies among the great mediums, and there would be many of them. Ever since the Chaos Fiend God possessed the great mediums, these great mediums of the primordial world could not be trusted. Who knew who was the Chaos Fiend God in disguise? There must be some unlucky people who were possessed by the Chaos Fiend God and were not exposed. There were quite a number of these unlucky people. They hid among the great mediums, like poisonous snakes hiding in the dark, and could give the primordial world a fatal blow at any time. Therefore, Feng Zichen had to be careful of them and not give them a chance to make a move. Regarding the matter of spies, Feng Zichen knew. The great mediums knew. In the primordial world, almost all the existences with the strength of the quasi-saint realm knew. Feng Zichen did not dare to let everyone enter the boundless starry sky because he was worried about the spies. In order to prove their innocence, everyone did not mention entering the boundless starry sky. What did they want to do by entering the boundless starry sky at this time? No matter what the purpose was, the person who made this request would definitely arouse everyone's suspicion. As everyone was afraid of each other, they began to exchange pleasantries in front of Feng Zichen's house. Gradually, Feng Zichen realized that it was not a good idea to continue like this. If word got out, it would make him seem impolite. Therefore, after some consideration, Feng Zichen decided to bring everyone to the heavenly court for an exchange. It was also because Haotian was not around, and Xianxia had abdicated. The heavenly court was in a state of being without a master that Feng Zichen dared to do so. If the heavenly court had a master, Feng Zichen's actions would be a slap in the face. No heavenly emperor would be happy. But now, the heavenly court had no master. Of course he had the final say. Fellow Taoists, it's not convenient for us to talk here. Why don't we go to the heavenly court? It just so happens that we can also discuss the candidate for the next heavenly emperor. The heavenly court has a rule to maintain the operation of the primordial world. It can't be without a master for a long time. After the greetings, Feng Zichen suggested to everyone with a smile. All right. Regarding this, everyone had no objections and agreed. Thus, Feng Zichen led everyone. They headed towards the heavenly court in a mighty manner. Fellow Taoists, now that Xianxia has abdicated, causing the position of heavenly emperor to be vacant, the heavenly court cannot be without a master for a day. Do you have a suitable candidate? In the Lingxiao Palace, after some small talk, Feng Zichen finally asked about serious matters. Your Majesty, do we still need the poor Wei and the others to recommend us? Right now, isn't there the most suitable candidate? As soon as Feng Zichen finished speaking, Zhen Yuanzi walked forward and said with a smile. Fellow Taoist Zhen Yuan is talking about? Feng Zichen asked knowingly. He couldn't say his name himself, right? How inappropriate would that be? It's you, Your Majesty. As he said that without waiting for Feng Zichen to refuse, Zhen Yuanzi continued, Your Majesty is the second in command of the three realms. Now that the heavenly emperor has entered a calamity, it's only right for Your Majesty to step forward and take charge of the heavenly court. This was the truth. It was reasonable and irrefutable. Great Emperor Ziwei was the legal successor of the heavenly emperor. This was recognized by the heavenly Tao. Fellow Taoist Zhen Yuanzi is right. It's most appropriate for His Majesty to step forward and take charge of the heavenly court. If His Majesty hadn't been seriously injured back then, His Majesty would have stepped forward to clean up the mess when the heavenly emperor entered the calamity. Why would he need to give up the 5 emperor positions to the human race? Yes. Before the heavenly empress reincarnated, didn't she also entrust the heavenly court to His Majesty? After Zhen Yuanzi finished speaking, the remaining great mediums echoed. Actually, in their hearts. As long as it wasn't a human who continued to be the heavenly emperor, then it didn't matter who came to be the heavenly emperor. Of course, it would be best if Feng Zichen was the one who became the heavenly emperor. Because he was the heavenly emperor. He was really too suitable. There was no other suitable candidate like him in the primordial world. Under the flattery of everyone, Feng Zichen was not prepared to hold back and was about to agree to this matter immediately. Okay. Since everyone has unanimously recommended me, then I won't refuse the position of the heavenly emperor. Just as Feng Zichen was about to agree, an accident happened. Quickly go to the chaos beyond the heavens. A heartless voice suddenly sounded in Feng Zichen's ear, interrupting what he was about to say. Heavenly Axie dash. In an instant, Feng Zichen's face darkened. Because he recognized whose voice it was. It was the heavenly axiom. In the primordial world, only the heavenly axiom could emit such an extremely cold and majestic voice. At this moment, at the moment when he was about to become the heavenly emperor, the heavenly axiom asked him to go to the chaos beyond the heavens. It would be strange if there was no problem. Obviously, someone did not want him to become the heavenly emperor. As for why he did not suspect that something had happened to the chaos first? Of course, that was because in Feng Zichen's perception, nothing unusual had happened to the chaos. If something happened to the chaos beyond the heavens, it would definitely be difficult to hide from his perception. Because Panga's projection covered the entire primordial world, and he controlled Panga's projection. This meant that the entire primordial world was under Feng Zichen's surveillance. Who could it be? The first thing to eliminate was the heavenly axiom. Feng Zichen was only temporarily taking over the position of the heavenly emperor. It was not like he was changing the world and completely replacing Haotian. When he returned, he would still have to return the power to Haotian. Since that was the case, such a small matter, the heavenly axiom would not care. If it was not the heavenly axiom, then it could only be the Tao ancestor or the six saints. In the primordial world, only they could mobilize the power of the heavenly axiom to stop him from becoming the heavenly emperor. Tao ancestor Hongjun might not have a reason to make a move, but the three pure ones and Juanti had a full reason. There was a grudge between Feng Zichen and them. With a suspect target, the next thing was much simpler. He only needed to go to the chaos beyond the heavens to verify it personally. One had to know. Among the saints, there were also people who stood on his side. Referring to Nuwa. Cough. Fellow Taoists, I already know your intentions. However, the heavenly axiom urgently summoned me to the chaos beyond the heavens. Therefore, the candidate for the heavenly emperor, you should choose another person. With a light cough to hide his embarrassment, Feng Zichen continued to speak. At the same time, the moment he spoke, an invisible aura spread out from his body. In an instant, it enveloped the entire Lingxiao palace. Chapter 656. The sudden change caused everyone's expressions to change. They hurriedly released their divine senses to check what had happened. Rumble. The majestic divine senses surged out and swept through the Lingxiao palace in the blink of an eye. Time and space are frozen? This is. After everyone sensed it, they did not find any danger. They only felt that the time and space here seemed to be isolated and had fallen into a stagnant state. I see. After thinking for a while, everyone understood Feng Zichen's intention. The heavenly axiom had summoned him, and he had to go. However, at this time, the candidate to succeed the heavenly emperor was still undecided, so he could not leave directly. The matters of both sides could not be delayed. For this reason, Feng Zichen simply froze the time and space here so that it could not flow. In this way, no matter how much time had passed in the Lingxiao palace, the time in the outside world would not move and would always remain at the previous moment. This move could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. It would not delay Feng Zichen's time to go to the chaos beyond the heavens, nor would it prevent him from choosing the next heavenly emperor. This made Feng Zichen much more relaxed. What happened just now, Ziwei had no choice but to do so. I hope everyone can forgive me. After everyone calmed down, Feng Zichen said apologetically. Although there was a reason for his action of freezing time and space, he did not inform everyone in advance. It was inevitable that it would cause everyone's displeasure. It was an emergency. Understandable. Understandable. When everyone heard this, they hurriedly waved their hands to show that they did not care about what happened just now. Now, they only had shock in their hearts. How could they care about their displeasure? Too strong. Feng Zichen's performance just now. It was really too strong. Just like that, he froze time and space in front of them, and they did not have any means to stop it. If such a method was used to deal with them, the consequences would be unimaginable. Their minds were completely immersed in the scene of Feng Zichen's action just now. How could they dare to go against Feng Zichen? As long as he did not go overboard, naturally, he would do whatever he said. His power was inferior, so it should be like this. Looking at everyone's expressions, Feng Zichen knew that he had achieved his goal of intimidating them. He made a move to freeze time and space. Saving time was only one aspect. On the other hand, it was to show everyone how powerful he was to intimidate them. Primordial world. After all, this was a place where strength spoke louder than words. If he did not show off his muscles, who would know how much he was worth? Who would take his words to heart? Fellow Taoists, are there any other candidates? Now that he had achieved his goal, Feng Zichen did not want to force them too much, lest it backfired. Therefore, he asked about the important matter. This. For a moment, everyone hesitated, not knowing what to say. In the end, it was because they could not figure out Feng Zichen's thoughts. In the vast untainted land, wasn't it easy to find a few people who were qualified to become celestial emperors? Even if that didn't work, couldn't they take the field themselves? The reason why they didn't speak was that they didn't know who could satisfy Feng Zichen. Thinking about it, they happily recommended a candidate that they were satisfied with, but Feng Zichen rejected it. Wouldn't that be awkward? Moreover, looking at Feng Zichen's attitude, It was obvious that he didn't want everyone to recommend him. Everyone was smart. From Feng Zichen's performance, they could roughly see that he already had a suitable candidate in his mind, but he was too embarrassed to say it out loud. What he was waiting for was just a step. He naturally said the candidate in his mind. And the step came very quickly. Your Majesty. Let's not talk about whether there is a suitable candidate in the minds of poor Wei and the others. Let's talk about whether there is a suitable candidate in your Majesty's mind? If there is, why don't you say it out loud and let poor Wei and the others discuss it? As if seeing Feng Zichen's dilemma, Zhen Yuanzi was very sensible and gave him a way out. Yes. We have already recommended him just now. Now it's time for your Majesty to recommend him. Hearing this, everyone hurriedly echoed. Seeing everyone's performance, Feng Zichen was very satisfied. But on the surface, he looked hesitant. It wasn't until after hesitating for a long time that he said with a troubled expression, "Since everyone says so, then I'll recommend a candidate. Look, what do you think of the Earth Empress?" As soon as he finished speaking, in an instant, the entire hall became so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The faces of the great divines froze on the spot. The Earth Empress. A name that didn't have much of a sense of existence almost made everyone forget her existence. But it was this name that brought great shock to everyone the moment Feng Zichen said her name. That was the incarnation of a saint. Everyone thought of many possibilities in their hearts, but they didn't expect that Feng Zichen would recommend the incarnation of the Earth Saint, one of the four royals, as the Heavenly Emperor. However, in a sense, that person was indeed one of the most suitable candidates. Everyone couldn't refute. Of course, the main reason was that they didn't dare to. That person was the person who couldn't be offended in the primordial world. Facing the Earth Empress who controlled the 6 paths of reincarnation, even Tao ancestor Hong Jun had to be polite to her. Not to mention the great magicians. After all, the Earth Empress had too much merit on her. The merit she obtained when she transformed into reincarnation was second only to the merit of opening the heavens. Fellow Taoists, I would like to invite the Earth Empress to ascend to the heavens and become the Emperor. What do you think? After a long time, Feng Zichen said. Naturally, no one dared to have any objections. If the Earth Empress is willing to come, that would naturally be excellent. But I'm afraid that the Empress might not be willing to come. After a while, someone seemed to have thought of something and said uncertainly, "Sigh. There's no need to worry. If the Earth Empress doesn't agree, you can let her recommend a candidate." Shaking his head, Feng Zichen said nonchalantly. Then, without waiting for anyone to reply, he disappeared on the spot. Fellow Taoists, I'll leave the matter of bringing the Earth Empress to the heavens to you. I'll head to the chaos outside the heavens first. After his figure completely disappeared, Feng Zichen's faintly discernible voice could be heard in the void. Obviously, he had already gone far away. Crash! The sound of a mirror shattering could be heard. The barrier that enveloped the Lingxiao treasure hall quietly shattered, and time and space returned to normal. Looking at Feng Zichen's empty seat, everyone was speechless. He left just like that? He just threw the trouble to them so casually? He was too carefree. Sigh. He's born to work. After sighing, everyone did not dare to delay and hurriedly rushed to the netherworld. The earlier they invited the Earth Empress, the earlier they could relax. Just as everyone was heading to the netherworld, the chaos outside the heavens. At the junction of the primordial world and the chaos outside the world, where the gate of witchcraft was, the atmosphere was extremely tense. Feng Zichen was confronting the 3 pure ones, Zhu and Ti, and the others. Since he was already here, it was not difficult for him to see who was secretly plotting against him. It was the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning. Back then, because of the matter of the South Pole Star, Feng Zichen had a conflict with the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning and embarrassed him in front of everyone. And this was extremely difficult for the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning, who cared about his reputation. Because of this, the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning secretly hated Feng Zichen and was prepared to find an opportunity to repay him. However, before he could find an opportunity to do so, the disaster of the Chaos Demon God erupted. Helpless, the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning could only go to the sky screen to resist the invasion of the Chaos Demon God. For this, to take revenge on Feng Zichen, he had to put it on hold for the time being. However, putting it on hold did not mean that the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning had forgotten about it. The Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning, who was bored in the chaos outside the heavens, planned to use the vision of his clone to observe the current situation of the primordial world. Good Lord, it did not matter what he saw, but he saw an opportunity to take revenge on Feng Zichen. At that time, it was when everyone elected Feng Zichen as the emperor. When the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning saw this scene, how could that be? Of course, he disagreed. He had to think of a way to stop it. After Feng Zichen attained the Tao, it was already very difficult to deal with him. If he became the Celestial Emperor, it would definitely encourage his arrogance. It could not be said that even a saint would find it difficult to restrain him. Feng Zichen becoming the Celestial Emperor, even if it was only temporary, would bring about a greater impact than Haotian. After all, Feng Zichen's strength was ranked there. Third heaven of primordial chaos. Or out of fear. Or out of revenge. In short, the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning decided to stop Feng Zichen from becoming the emperor. And the three pure ones were one. Since the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning had made a move, the Grand Pure One and the Grand Master of Heaven naturally could not just stand by and watch. Whether they were willing or not, they had to help. As for why the three pure ones were involved in receiving Xianxia, it had to be explained from the matter of their identities being exposed. Because of their background, the two of them had been faintly excluded from the circle by the crowd. For this, the two of them already had a bad relationship with the Panga divine system, and it fell to the freezing point. It could even be said that they had become enemies. Since that was the case, when the two of them saw the internal strife in the Panga divine system, they were naturally extremely happy. They had become enemies. Of course, they could not bear to see the other party doing well. If the Panga divine system was harmonious, how could the two of them have the chance to rise? Only when the Panga divine system fought with each other openly and secretly would they have the chance to fish in troubled waters and obtain a chance to develop. Under such circumstances, when they saw the three pure ones, who were the authentic Panga divine system, targeting the other authentic Panga divine Emperor Ziwei, they naturally did not want to stop them. Instead, they wanted to add fuel to the fire and make the relationship between them even worse. Only in this way would it be in their interests. Therefore, it was precisely because of this consideration. When the three pure ones made a move, receiving Xianxia also secretly helped. The power of the five saints working together was enough to affect the operation of the Way of the Heavens for a short period of time. This was also the reason why the Way of the Heavens called Feng Zichen to the chaos beyond the heavens. It was completely the result of the saints behind the scenes. Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning. What do you mean? Standing in the chaos, Feng Zichen coldly questioned the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning opposite him. As he spoke, an invisible aura erupted. It pressed forward with a loud bang, crushing the surrounding chaos aura. To be honest, compared to the chaos aura of the great chaos beyond the realm, the chaos aura of the chaos beyond the heavens was as weak as a baby. Too weak. Feng Zichen could shatter it with a slight move. Feng Zichen was very angry, very angry. The position of Celestial Emperor was right in front of him, but it was gone just like that. No matter who it was, they would be angry. Moreover, was Feng Zichen angry about losing the position of Celestial Emperor? He was angry about the occurrence of the variables. The situation had already somewhat exceeded his control. One had to know that the position of Celestial Emperor was related to the future of the human race. In the end, it was lost by the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning just like that. How could he not hate? If it weren't for the fact that the other party had more people, Feng Zichen would probably have made a move directly. However, he couldn't even defeat the three pure ones when they joined forces, let alone the two of them who were receiving Xianxia. However, even if he couldn't defeat them, he couldn't lose his momentum. After all, he was in the right. Moreover, the three pure ones probably couldn't afford to lose that person and would join forces to attack him. If Xianxia was receiving Xianxia, Feng Zichen believed that the two of them would join forces. However, the three pure ones might not be so. It was not a good thing to care about face. Fellow Taoist Ziwei, what do you mean by this? Seeing Feng Zichen's aggressive posture, the Grand Pure One asked with some displeasure. At the same time as he spoke, he gently waved his hand and created a breeze. He easily resolved Feng Zichen's aura. Seeing this scene, Feng Zichen's pupils constricted. Just from this move, it could be seen that the Grand Pure One's cultivation was not weak. One had to know, in order to gain the upper hand. When Feng Zichen unleashed his aura, although he did not use the Ziwei Emperor Qi, he used the power of the boundless starry sky. With the domineering power of the boundless starry sky, even if Feng Zichen unleashed it with the cultivation of the third heaven of primordial chaos, its power was not weaker than the full-strength attack of an ordinary primordial chaos expert. It was such an attack. But it was easily resolved by the Grand Pure One. From this, it could be deduced that he had at least the sixth heaven of primordial chaos. Well, most importantly, or because Feng Zichen could not see through the realm of the Grand Pure One. With his cultivation of the fifth heaven of primordial chaos, he could not see the true realm of the Grand Pure One. Without a doubt, the Grand Pure One was definitely stronger than him. That was the sixth heaven. Of course, Feng Zichen could not see the realm of the Grand Pure One. However, the realm of others could not be hidden from him. Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning, Grand Master of Heaven, Saint Jianghu, and Goddess Nuwa were all at the fifth heaven of primordial chaos like him. However, because of the mending of the heavens, there was something wrong with Goddess Nuwa's condition. She looked a little weak. Although she was at the fifth heaven and was even close to the sixth heaven of primordial chaos, she could not unleash her full strength. After the Tao body mended the heavens, it still affected her strength in the end, causing her to become a saint in one fell swoop. However, there were gains and losses. Although her strength had decreased, her realm had increased. The peak of the fifth heaven of primordial chaos was second only to the Grand Pure One's sixth heaven of primordial chaos. It was even higher than Feng Zichen's realm. Chapter 657. This was probably. It was the compensation that the heavenly Tao gave to Nuwa. Since she was injured because of the world, the heavenly Tao would naturally not treat her unfairly to avoid losing fairness. Anyway, in general, Nuwa did not suffer any losses. She even made a small profit. After all, after reaching the primordial chaos, the realm was harder to improve than the origin. Primordial chaos transcended time and space. Time was meaningless to them. They had an almost eternal lifespan. And the origin would slowly increase with the passage of time. But the realm would not. The realm was only related to the comprehension of the Tao. It would not slowly increase with the passage of time. After the four saints was Saint Xianxia, and he was the only person who could make Feng Zichen feel gratified. Because Xianxia's realm was only at the fourth heaven of primordial chaos. Compared to Feng Zichen, he was a level lower. He could be said to be the existence with the lowest realm among the seven saints. As for why it was the seven saints and not the six saints, the reason was that although Feng Zichen did not know the true strength of the Hutu, he knew that it was definitely not lower than the fifth heaven of primordial chaos. One had to know that once the Hutu broke through, she was already at the fourth heaven of primordial chaos. Now that so many years had passed, it was impossible for her not to improve. And this meant that the Hutu's realm was higher than that of Saint Xianxia. So, Feng Zichen dared to say, the realm of Saint Xianxia could be said to be at the bottom of the seven saints. This did not mean that Saint Xianxia's talent was worse than the other six saints. On the contrary, for existences at their level, most of their talent was about the same. Even if there was a difference, it would not be too obvious. And the reason why such a big difference happened was mainly because of Saint Xianxia himself. He did not work hard. Among the seven saints, only Saint Xianxia did not cultivate diligently. While everyone was working hard to cultivate, Saint Xianxia was working hard for the revival of the Western sect. It was precisely because of this. That was why his cultivation was delayed. As a result, his cultivation level fell behind everyone else. Of course, it was also because Saint Xianxia was running around outside that Saint Jianghu could settle down and focus on cultivation. In terms of realm, he was on par with everyone else. the Western sect could have today. It was all thanks to Saint Jianghu. With the pain of one man, in exchange for the prosperity of the West. From a certain perspective, Saint Jianghu was worthy of the word great. Hee. Fellow Taoist Grand Pure One, why are you asking when you already know the answer? Do you really not know my intentions? With a sneer, Feng Zichen curled his lips and mocked. At this moment, the Grand Pure One was still pretending. It was as if they were not the ones who had used the heavenly Tao to call him over. His face was truly shameless. Poor Wei, I don't know. Poor Wei only saw fellow Taoist speaking ill of my second brother the moment you arrived, and even wanting to attack him. The Grand Pure One shook his head and said. And from what he said, it was as if Feng Zichen was being unreasonable. What do you mean by lying through your teeth? What do you mean by making bogus accusations? This was it. Feng Zichen was so angry that he was speechless. If the three Pure Ones refused to admit it, he would not be able to find any evidence. After all, the one who called him over was the heavenly Tao, not the three Pure Ones. He could secretly interfere with the operation of the heavenly Tao, but he could not say it. Did the heavenly Tao not want face? Therefore, once such a thing was said, it might cause a huge storm. It was normal for the three Pure Ones not to admit it. Good. Very good. Is this the leader of the saints? His methods are indeed impressive. I've seen it today. This is a loss. This solitude accepts it. However, Grand Pure One, since you're willing to bear this karma for the Heavenly Lord of Primordial beginning today, don't blame me for giving you retribution in the future. There's still a long way to go. Let's wait and see. Suddenly, Feng Zichen smiled. He could not help but shake his head and say to the Grand Pure One. He did not let it go. Instead, he remembered this matter in his heart. At this moment, the other party had the advantage in numbers. If Feng Zichen continued to cause trouble, no matter what the outcome was, he would definitely be the one to suffer in the end. Since that was the case, he might as well put this matter aside for the time being, and wait for an opportunity to take revenge in the future. The battle of primordial chaos was not in a moment, but in a lifetime. One had to know that the human race was still in his hands. If the Grand Pure One wanted to preach in the human race, he would definitely not be able to bypass Feng Zichen. And this was his chance to take revenge. Sigh. Fellow Taoist, why bother? Hearing that, the Grand Pure One did not have much of a reaction. He only shook his head and said indifferently. Obviously. He did not take Feng Zichen's words to heart. That's right. With the Grand Pure One's status, why would he be afraid of the threat of others? It was more like he was threatening others. Hee. Feng Zichen did not say anything about that. He turned around and walked to the side to study the sky screen. It was useless to say anything about such matters. He still had to rely on his actions to speak. When the Grand Pure One was schemed against by him, he would regret it as much as he was arrogant today. Anyway, no matter what. Today, Feng Zichen and the Grand Pure One had completely formed a grudge. Trouble. On the other side of the chaos beyond the heavens, Feng Zichen could not help but have a headache. What happened just now not only made him think too much. Just as the plan of the four royals was set, he was called to the chaos beyond the heavens. Was this really a coincidence? Perhaps, there was a force in the dark that was interfering with everything. Being in the chaos beyond the heavens, Feng Zichen would probably not be able to return to the primordial world in a short period of time. Then the matter of him becoming the celestial emperor would be completely ruined. In this way, even if the plan of the four royals was carried out as usual, the human race would not be able to gather 8 celestial emperors. The difference between 7 and 8 celestial emperors seemed very small, but who knew how many variables would appear during this period? The difficulty of planning the positions of 2 celestial emperors was completely different from that of 1. In short, Feng Zichen's plan was completely messed up. I knew that the matter of the 9 celestial emperors wouldn't be so simple to complete. At this point, Feng Zichen had no choice but to take one step at a time. Most things in the world were like this. The greater the benefits, the more difficult it was. This was the so-called good things are strewn with setbacks. At this moment, in the primordial world, In front of the netherworld, a group of great divine abilities stood there quietly, as if waiting for someone to arrive. They were waiting for the Lady of Earth. With the speed of the great divine abilities, they naturally arrived at the netherworld very quickly. However, it was not until they arrived at the netherworld that they realized that the netherworld was still in a sealed state. In other words, they could not enter. That was awkward. However, even if they could not enter, they still had to do it. Therefore, Xianxia stepped forward and contacted the Lady of Earth across worlds. Why Xianxia? Because he was a famous good person in the primordial world. He had face with everyone. Moreover, Xianxia and the Lady of Earth were both cultivators of the path of Earth. They had a friendship in the early years. It was best for him to step forward. Just as everyone was silent, the Lady of Earth came slowly. Fellow Taoists, please don't blame me. Now that the Chaos Fiend God is causing trouble in the netherworld, in order to prevent him from escaping the netherworld and causing trouble in the primordial world, we have no choice but to join forces to seal the realm. We can't let outsiders enter at will. Walking in front of everyone, the Lady of Earth said apologetically. That's how it should be. Hearing that, everyone did not show any dissatisfaction and expressed their understanding. The Chaos Fiend God was a huge problem. Compared to him, their grievances were nothing. Fellow Taoists, what brings you here? After exchanging pleasantries, the Lady of Earth asked about their intentions. Empress, Poor Wei and the others are here to invite you to ascend to the heavens. Xianxia straightened his face and spoke on behalf of everyone. Ha! The Lady of Earth was a little puzzled. Empress, you might not know this, but ever since Emperor Xian abdicated, the position of Celestial Emperor has been empty. However, the heavenly court cannot be without a ruler for a day. Therefore, we have specially come here to invite you to ascend to the heavens and become the emperor. As he spoke, Xianxia bowed to the Lady of Earth. We implore Empress to ascend to the heavens. When the people behind him saw this, they followed suit and bowed. The Lady of Earth was speechless. She hadn't figured out what had happened yet, and they wanted her to ascend to the heavens and become the emperor? Her heart stirred slightly. In just an instant, the Lady of Earth knew the cause and effect. She couldn't help but be annoyed with Feng Zichen. What kind of idea did he come up with? Now, there were still a lot of things waiting for her to deal with in the netherworld. How could she have the time to go to the heavenly court to become the emperor? Fellow Taoists, please get up. There were thousands of thoughts in her mind, but the Lady of Earth didn't forget to ask everyone to get up. What was the point of bowing all the time? I already know the purpose of everyone's visit, but everyone knows the situation in the netherworld. The tribulation of the Chaos Fiend God hasn't passed, so I really can't leave. Shaking her head, the Lady of Earth refused. If there was no threat from the Chaos Fiend God, she would have agreed. But now, there were countless Chaos Fiend gods hidden in the 9 underworlds. In order to prevent them from attacking the 6 paths of reincarnation, none of the top combat strength of the netherworld could leave. So, the Lady of Earth couldn't agree to everyone's request. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but look at each other, their faces full of embarrassment. This reason, it could be considered as blocking all their words of persuasion. The position of the Celestial Emperor was very important, but the safety of the primordial world was even more important. If the Chaos Fiend God fled to the primordial world because of the Lady of Earth's departure, then their sins would be great. Then, Empress, do you have a suitable candidate in mind? Everyone felt helpless. They knew that it was impossible for the Lady of Earth to become the Celestial Emperor, so they asked. They thought that since they had come this time, they couldn't come in vain. It didn't matter if they couldn't invite the Lady of Earth. It wasn't impossible for her to recommend a suitable candidate. The great Emperor of Ziwei wasn't around. The great Emperor of the South Pole was in seclusion to heal his injuries. After the North Star Emperor faked his death, no one knew where he went. Of the 4 heavenly emperors, the only one who was still active was the Lady of Earth. So, this concerned the candidate of the Celestial Emperor. Who else could they ask? No one else had the right to agree. A suitable candidate? Yes. It's not that there isn't one. The Lady of Earth originally wanted to reject him directly, but suddenly, an idea flashed through her mind. She thought of someone and could not help but change her words. Who? After hearing that the Lady of Earth had a candidate, everyone's heart skipped a beat and they quickly asked. At this moment, everyone had already made up their minds. As long as the candidate proposed by the Lady of Earth wasn't too ridiculous, no matter who it was, they would directly agree. It was too annoying. This matter was too vexing. It was just choosing a temporary celestial emperor, and there were so many twists and turns. They had to run around. Wasn't it deliberately tormenting people? If they had known earlier, they wouldn't have let Xianxia abdicate. They would have let him stay until Haotian returned. Fellow Taoists, what do you think of Taoist Xianxia? After thinking for a while, the Lady of Earth said a name that was beyond everyone's expectations. Who? Empress, who are you talking about? Hearing this, everyone was stunned and asked in disbelief. They felt that the Xianxia that the Lady of Earth mentioned was not the same person as the Xianxia that they knew. The 9 heavens immortal venerables of the celestial sect of wonders, Taoist Xianxia. He is also the grand disciple of Tao ancestor Hongjun, the eldest disciple of fellow Taoist Xianxia, and your disciple nephew. Seeing that everyone was puzzled, the Lady of Earth repeated and emphasized Xianxia's origin. A genius of the celestial sect of wonders. The first person of the 3rd generation. This is one of your own. To let one of your own become the celestial emperor. I, the Lady of Earth, am generous enough. Empress, you're talking about disciple-nephew Xianxia. If it's him, it's not impossible. I just don't know how his cultivation is now. If you want to be the celestial emperor, you can't be too weak. After thinking for a while, everyone nodded. If Xianxia officially became the celestial emperor, these powerful beings naturally wouldn't agree. They couldn't accept a future life sitting on their heads. However, it wasn't impossible for them to accept such a temporary role as the celestial emperor. It was only 1,000,000 years. At most, they would go into seclusion for 1,000,000 years. However, there was one thing that they didn't understand. Why would the Lady of Earth recommend Xianxia? One had to know. Xianxia was a member of their celestial sect of wonders. The kind that couldn't be in the middle. Moreover, Xianxia was from the 3 pure ones. As everyone knew, the relationship between the 3 pure ones and the 12 ancestral shamans had always been bad. This made people have to investigate whether there was any conspiracy behind the Lady of Earth's recommendation of Xianxia. However, it didn't matter. Even if there was any conspiracy, it was aimed at the 3 pure ones. It had nothing to do with them. It should be the 3 pure ones' headache. And they. All he had to do was to complete his mission. Empress, since that's the case, Poor Wei and the others will take their leave. Let's go to the East Sea to see how strong Xianxia is. We'll make plans after that. After bowing to the Lady of Earth, everyone took their leave and hurried to the East Sea. Looking at her anxious look, it was obvious that she had set her sights on Xianxia. It was not easy to find a suitable candidate. There could not be any more accidents. Of course, it was better to find him as soon as possible. If they remembered correctly, Xianxia should have broken through to the quasi-saint realm. This strength might not be enough to be the real celestial emperor, but it was enough for the time being. Taoist Xianxia. With this, the karma between you and me can be considered to have been settled. Chapter 658. Looking at the back of everyone, the Hutu had a lot of thoughts in her heart. She recommended Xianxia to be the celestial emperor, of course, not because of Feng Zichen. In fact, because of the special identity of Xianxia. Feng Zichen hid his identity very well. Xianxia was a disciple of the 3 pure ones. If his true identity was exposed, what would happen? If not, the 3 pure ones, who were enraged out of humiliation, would crush his bones and scatter his ashes. Therefore, in the primordial world, other than him, no one knew the relationship between him and Xianxia. In other words, in the eyes of the primordial world's great masters and even the heavenly Tao, Xianxia was a connate god-fiend born from the connate pure qi. He was a separate individual and had nothing to do with Feng Zichen. Then the problem came. Since the relationship between Xianxia and Feng Zichen was not exposed, why did the Hutu recommend Xianxia to be the celestial emperor? And this had to start from when the Hutu turned into reincarnation. Back then, when the Hutu turned into reincarnation in the Sea of Blood, Xianxia had once used the White Lotus of Purification to purify the vengeful souls and perfect the netherworld, helping the Hutu. For this, karma was formed between the two of them. Whether the Hutu was willing or not, she owed Xianxia a favor. Then, Xianxia obtained the consent of the mighty figures of the netherworld and opened up the 10 directions pure land in this world. He used the White Lotus of Purification as a boat to guide the billions of suffering people in the primordial world. And the 10 directions pure land became the nail that the celestial sect of wonders buried in the netherworld. At the same time, it was also the only force of the celestial sect of wonders in the netherworld. The 10 directions pure land was formed. What was settled was only the karma between Xianxia and the netherworld, but the karma between him and the Hutu was not settled. No matter what Xianxia's original purpose was, he did contribute when the Hutu turned into reincarnation. The Hutu had to accept his favor, whether she was willing or not. This was karma. All along, the Hutu had wanted to repay this karma to maintain the clarity of her soul. But she had never found an opportunity. Because Xianxia was too outstanding, the Hutu could not find a suitable thing to compensate him. Things had been put aside. And as time passed, this matter gradually turned into a sore point for Hutu. Logically speaking, a mere strand of karma should not have affected Hutu so much. However, Xianxia was a disciple of the 3 pure ones. There was no need to talk about the relationship between the 3 pure ones and the 12 grand sorcerers. In that case, as the ancestor of sorcery, the last thing Hutu wanted in her life was to have anything to do with the 3 pure ones. But because of Xianxia, he was involved with the 3 pure ones. This was something that Hutu couldn't tolerate. That was why she had been thinking of ways to end the karma with Xianxia. But it was a pity. No matter what Hutu did, she failed. As the leader of the 3 generations, Xianxia really didn't lack anything. Originally, as time passed, Hutu was about to give up. He decided to let nature take its course. After all, saints were immortal. In their long lives, there would always be a time when they would repay their karma. But she didn't expect that with the arrival of these people, Hutu would see the possibility of repaying her karma. If Xianxia was promoted to the position of Celestial Emperor, wouldn't the karma between him and her be settled? The Celestial Emperor was the supreme being of the primordial world. He had the luck of heaven and earth in his body. He had great creation and great merit. He could be said to be boundless. If Xianxia became the Celestial Emperor, even if it was only temporary, he would be able to obtain unimaginable benefits. Perhaps this experience would be his capital to become the primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian in the future. The benefits of this. It was enough to end the karma with Xianxia. That was what Hutu thought. That was what she did. Therefore, she directly recommended Xianxia to everyone. Moreover, she wasn't afraid that everyone would refuse. Because Hutu didn't intend to ask for everyone's opinion at all. It wasn't easy for her to find a way to repay her karma. How could she let it go? In fact, regardless of whether everyone agreed or not, Hutu would push Xianxia to the position of Celestial Emperor to end the karma. Don't doubt that as the only saint who could appear in the primordial world, Hutu had this ability. She was invincible. That was the current Hutu. If everyone disagreed, then they would fight until they agreed. It was also because everyone was tactful that they didn't say anything to refuse. Otherwise, they would probably suffer a lot of physical pain. After all, the witch race's violent temper. That was famous in the primordial world. Everything was perfect. But from the beginning to the end, Hutu and the others had never considered Xianxia's attitude. They weren't worried that he would refuse. That was true. Everyone was here. There was no room for Xianxia to refuse. Besides, he wasn't prepared to refuse. East Sea. Penglai Immortal Island. Xianxia, who was in seclusion, suddenly felt a terrifying aura coming from afar. At that moment, he couldn't care less about his seclusion. He rushed out of the island and looked into the distance. After him, a figure walked out from the depths of the East Sea. He looked into the distance with a face full of surprise and uncertainty. This was a peerless expert of the Dragon Clan. When the experts of the Aqua Clan were heading to the easternmost region, He had been secretly guarding the East Sea to prevent anyone from seizing the foundation of the Dragon Clan. Today he who was sleeping was awakened by the terrifying aura coming from afar. He thought that something had happened in the East Sea, so he hurriedly ran out to observe the situation. Hiss! These auras are so familiar. They are. Above the East Sea, Xianxia looked at the large auspicious clouds floating in the distance in bewilderment. He couldn't figure out why everyone had rushed to the East Sea. Looking at their route, their goal was the Panglai Immortal Island. In the sky, the auspicious clouds were endless, almost covering half of the sky. Seeing this, Xianxia didn't know who had come. He had lived so long in vain. But he didn't know why they were here. Did something big happen? Or were they here to cause trouble for him? Thinking of this, Xianxia couldn't help but reflect on his recent actions. But he suddenly realized that he had been in seclusion on the Panglai Immortal Island recently. He hadn't done anything. So, they weren't here to cause trouble for him. Something big had happened, and it had something to do with him. Faintly, Xianxia felt his mind shake, and a divine light appeared in front of his eyes. It was as if something amazing was about to happen to him. A whim. This was a sign that something good was about to happen. Thinking of this, Xianxia completely relaxed. He squeezed out a smile and greeted the people who had rushed over from afar. Uncle Masters, why didn't you greet Xianxia before you came here? So that Xianxia could be prepared and not be rude. Coming in front of everyone, Xianxia bowed and said, "Yes. Not bad. The cultivation of a late-stage quasi-saint is not bad. What do you think, everyone? It's him. How about it?" Everyone ignored Xianxia. They just went forward and carefully sized him up before communicating with each other. Sure. As if they had reached some consensus, everyone nodded. Uncle Masters, what do you mean by this? Being sized up by a group of single old men, Xianxia was very uncomfortable and couldn't help but ask. Disciple nephew Xianxia, you're in luck. Now that the position of Heavenly Emperor is empty, in order to prevent the Heavenly Court from being without a master for a long time, it will affect the normal operation of the primordial world. Goddess Hutu recommended you to the poor way and the others so that you can ascend to the Heavenly Emperor. So, disciple nephew, if there's nothing else, you can go to the heavenly realm with the poor way and the others. Withdrawing his gaze from Xianxia, a great magician said with an expression that said, "You're in luck." This? Hearing this, Xianxia was at a loss. To be honest, he was really shocked. The surprise had come too suddenly. One had to know that not long ago, he was still worried about the matter of the Heavenly Emperor. But in the blink of an eye, the matter of the Heavenly Emperor that had troubled him was suddenly solved. The position of Celestial Emperor that others yearned for but could not obtain had fallen on his head without any warning. What a pleasant surprise! If Xianxia was the Heavenly Emperor, he could fill the vacancy of the original body and allow the human race to continue to have 8 Heavenly Emperors, thus correcting Feng Zichen's plan. Everything would return to normal. No. If Xianxia was the Heavenly Emperor, then the next thing would be much simpler than the original plan. The 9th Heavenly Emperor didn't need to plan at all. As long as he let nature take its course, it would naturally appear. After the initial shock, Xianxia's heart surged with ecstasy, but he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he deliberately put on a difficult look and pretended to say to everyone, "This isn't appropriate, is it? Xianxia's ability is low. How can he spy on the supreme position?" According to Xianxia's intention, of course he couldn't agree directly. He had to pretend to decline. In the end, under the persuasion of everyone, he reluctantly agreed to everyone's request. To show that he wasn't greedy for power. Originally, this was nothing. After all, this was almost a convention. Starting from Fuxi, every generation of heavenly emperors had been like this. But when it came to Xianxia, there was a change. What was the identity of the previous heavenly emperors? The human emperor that was personally conferred by the heavenly axiom had the support of the heavens and earth, and his identity was incomparably noble. Therefore, even if everyone was unwilling, they had to accompany them to finish the show. Because the human emperor had this qualification. But what was Xianxia's identity? Was he everyone's disciple nephew, their junior? Since that was the case, What qualifications did Xianqing have to make everyone accompany him to play the trick of abdicating? Xianqing's show was halfway through. He was forcefully interrupted by the impatient crowd. Your Majesty, it's getting late. We should leave. Fellow Taoist in the sky, I'm afraid you're already waiting anxiously. With that, without waiting for Xianqing to reply, the group of great mediums carried him and flew towards the heavenly court. During this period, Xianqing had been in a state of confusion. This script was completely wrong. It shouldn't be that he refused, everyone invited him again, and then he refused again. After doing this again and again, did he just agree with a difficult expression? F***ck, noun, a kind of plant. How could this situation be explained? It was really quite speechless. To be forcefully carried to the heavenly court. He was probably the most aggrieved heavenly emperor in the history of the primordial world. Even Haotian had never been so aggrieved. It wasn't that Xianqing hadn't thought of resisting. However, he was only at the late stage of the quasi-sage realm. Even with the power of a magic treasure, he could exert the power of a perfected quasi-sage, or even the power of a half-step primordial chaos. However, what he had to face was a group of top-notch great mediums of the half-step primordial chaos level. If they really fought, unless he could erupt with power comparable to the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, he could only be suppressed by everyone. The difference in strength was too great. Just like that, Xianqing became the 8th heavenly emperor of the primordial world under the coercion of everyone. Dijun, Haotian, the 5 heavenly emperors. And just after Xianqing ascended the throne, a group of great mediums announced that they would be in seclusion and would not come out. This made Xianqing, who wanted to take revenge, gnash his teeth in hatred, but there was nothing he could do about them. I didn't expect that the turning point of the matter would happen to the Lady of Earth. It's really a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect that the casual action back then would have such an unexpected effect. It can be said that it has helped me a lot. Fate is really playing tricks on people. In the chaos outside the sky, after learning about everything that happened in the primordial world, Feng Zichen said with emotion. He really didn't expect that the Lady of Earth would recommend Xianqing to be the heavenly emperor. To be honest, Feng Zichen had long forgotten about the karma between him and the Lady of Earth. After all, he had gone to the Blood Sea with the intention of freeloading merit. In this way, after getting the merit, how could he have the face to ask for a favor? Feng Zichen still cared about his face. However, he didn't expect that the Lady of Earth didn't forget. She always remembered this matter, and finally found an opportunity to completely repay this karma. This time, I owe the Lady of Earth a favor. Secretly, Feng Zichen thought silently. However, this was nothing. With his relationship with the wizard clan, this favor was not worth fussing over. If he really wanted to calculate, wouldn't the wizard clan owe him more? Now that Xianqing is the emperor, if the plan of the 4 royals can be carried out normally, then the matter of the 9 heavenly emperors appearing in the human race will be simple. In the chaos outside the sky, Feng Zichen hid in a corner and began to think about the impact of Xianqing becoming the emperor on his plan. In fact, it didn't have much of an impact. If he really had to say, it could only be said that after Xianqing became the emperor, his plan went even smoother. According to the original plan, the 3 great emperors of Ziwei, North Star, and South Pole would become the heavenly emperor. However, because of the saint, the plan had changed, and he had to replace Ziwei with Xianqing. This was a good thing. After Xianqing, there were South Pole, North Star, and Ziwei. In this way, wouldn't the human race have 9 heavenly emperors? Of course, things weren't that simple. According to Feng Zichen's estimation, he was now like the saint, guarding the chaos outside the sky. If he wanted to return to the primordial world, he would have to wait until Haotian returned. In this way, the plan could be considered a failure. However, don't forget that the great emperor of Ziwei was the 2nd emperor of the 3 realms. He was destined to become the heavenly emperor. Therefore, even if Feng Zichen couldn't become the heavenly emperor at this time, as time passed, he would eventually become the heavenly emperor. It could be said that as long as the North Star and South Pole could successfully ascend after Xianqing, then the fate of the human race in the heavenly court would be completely united. Chapter 659. Right now. The only thing he needed to worry about was the time for Haotian to return. If Haotian suddenly returned after Xianxia abdicated before the two emperors of the North Star and the South Pole ascended to the throne, then everything would be over. No matter how perfect Feng Zichen's plan was, it would be useless. Because Haotian was the true celestial emperor recognized by heaven and earth. Unless he lost his virtue in the primordial world. Otherwise, no one could compete with him for the position of celestial emperor. Not even Feng Zichen. Therefore, for the sake of the human race, no matter what, he could not let Haotian return before the North Star and the South Pole. He had to do everything he could to stop him. This matter can't be delayed. Millions of years have passed. Haotian might return at any time. I need to make plans early. I can't let him ruin my plan. Thinking of the impact of Haotian's return after the tribulation, Feng Zichen made a decision in his heart. Therefore, he used the excuse of looking at the sky screen to walk to the other side of the chaos to avoid everyone's sight. The three pure ones and the others had no objection to this. They did not want to see Feng Zichen either. Since both sides hated each other, they might as well not meet. Anyway, the three pure ones and the others were not worried that Feng Zichen would do anything. He had already come to the chaos outside the sky. Could he still jump across the boundless chaos and interfere with the normal operation of the primordial world? Therefore, the three pure ones and the others were very assured of Feng Zichen. It was a pity that they still did not know Feng Zichen very well. Not to mention the chaos outside the sky. Even in the chaos outside the world, Feng Zichen had a way to interfere with the normal operation of the primordial world. The huge projection of Pangu standing above the primordial world was the reason why he could still control the primordial world after leaving it. After all, the name of Pangu went deep into every corner of the primordial world. Feng Zichen walked for a long time in the chaos outside the sky. He only stopped when he could not see the figures of the three pure ones and the others. It's here. Calming his mind, Feng Zichen followed the connection and established a connection with the projection of Pangu standing above the primordial world. Sacrifice. An extremely small fluctuation emitted from Feng Zichen's body, crossed the boundless chaos, and entered the projection of Pangu. Then, this inconceivably huge existence suddenly opened its eyes. Soon after, an invisible aura burst out and shook the entire untainted land. Rumble. At this moment, all the living beings in the untainted land, including the powerful divines and the saints in the chaos outside the sky, felt their hearts throbbing inexplicably. They could not help but feel a chill in their hearts as if they were being targeted by some great existence. But no matter how they probed, they could not find the source of this throbbing. Just as everyone was puzzled, another supreme power swept over and swept past their bodies. After that, these powerful beings all forgot what had just happened. It was the same for the saints. The reason for all of this was the power of Pangu's projection. Pangu's strength could be seen from this. Of course, not everyone was affected by the power of Pangu's projection. After all, Pangu's projection was only Pangu's projection. It was not the real Pangu, so its power was not limitless. And this upper limit was the perfected primordial chaos. Therefore, Tao ancestor Hong Jun, who was in the Purple Cloud Palace, was not affected by this power. He still remembered everything that had just happened. What? Pangu? Why would Grand Monarch Pangu's power suddenly appear? Could it be that there's some change in the primordial world that the poor Wei doesn't know about? In the Purple Cloud Palace, Tao ancestor Hong Jun stared at the primordial world in surprise, hoping to find something wrong. But unfortunately, he stared with his eyes wide open for a long time, but he did not find anything unusual. The primordial world was still operating normally. It shouldn't be. After staring for a long time, Tao ancestor Hong Jun did not see anything. He could only helplessly withdraw his gaze and continue to comprehend the heavenly Tao. He blamed all of this on the fact that Pangu's power was too strong, beyond his understanding. Therefore he could not see anything. It was normal for Tao ancestor Hong Jun to think so. After all, it was not the first time that he could not see the impact of Pangu's attack. For example, last time, Pangu's will suddenly appeared and blasted at the chaos demon god from afar. He could not see what Pangu's purpose was. This kind of thing might be shocking once or twice, but after experiencing it many times, he would get used to it. Just as Dao ancestor Hong Jun continued to comprehend the Dao, in a place that he could not see, under the influence of Panga's projection, the vast and unfathomable heavenly Dao slowly changed. The heavenly Dao changed. Countless changes immediately occurred in the heavenly Dao. Everything that had been arranged in the dark began to undergo unknown changes. Among these changes, Haotian's arrangement was the most variable. The time for his return from the tribulation was silently delayed and set to 3 million years later. Under the intervention of Panga's projection, no matter when the heavenly Dao arranged for Hao Tian to return from the tribulation, it was now 3 million years later. And 3 million years was the limit that Feng Zichen could do. At the same time, it was also the limit that the heavenly Dao could bear. If it exceeded this time, even with Panga's projection, Feng Zichen would still not be able to escape the backlash of the heavenly Dao. However, although 3 million years was not long, it was enough to give birth to 3 celestial emperors. This was exactly what Feng Zichen needed. In this way, then everything will be fine. As long as there are no accidents, the plan can be carried out smoothly. After doing all this, Feng Zichen did not worry about what would happen next. Instead, he immersed himself in cultivation. He had done everything that needed to be done. Next, he could only leave it to fate. Being in the chaos outside the heavens and separated by such a long distance, even someone as powerful as him could not always pay attention to everything in the primordial world. Since that was the case, he might as well use this opportunity to consolidate his realm. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, 1 million years had passed. And 1 million years was enough for the primordial world to undergo earth-shaking changes. At this time, the cultivation environment of the primordial world further deteriorated. The traces of the pre-celestial era became fewer and fewer. On the contrary, the world was filled with the aura of the post-celestial realm. Obviously, the change of the world had reached the end. The era of the post-celestial realm was about to descend. The pre-celestial era was about to become history. For this reason, the pre-celestial life forms on the earth became fewer and fewer. They either gradually withered with time, or they could not hold on any longer and went to the heaven realm. Of course, there were also some pre-celestial life forms who were exceptions. For example, those pre-celestial races who controlled the heavenly palace. They relied on the heavenly palace's ability to go against the pre-celestial realm and barely retained some traces of the pre-celestial era. But this did not mean that their situation was very good. On the contrary, their current situation was very bad. Although the heavenly palace was powerful, it was not powerful enough to contend with the power of the world. Therefore, even if the heavenly palace's power was fully unleashed, it could only affect the nearby area, allowing it to retain the pre-celestial environment. It could not do anything further away. In other words, the closer it was to the heavenly palace, the more perfect the pre-celestial environment would be. And what about those further away? The effect would decline in a step-like manner until there was no effect at all. The heavenly palace's ability was limited and not enough to support a race. This forced those pre-celestial races to make a choice. They let the direct descendants live near the heavenly palace and occupy the best place. The collateral descendants lived in the periphery of the heavenly palace. By doing so, they preserved the congenital bloodline of the direct descendants. However, the bloodline of those collateral descendants had already degenerated and gradually transformed into post-celestial life forms. For this, the myriad races were declining. Of course, it was different from the gradual decline of the myriad races. With the advent of the post-celestial era, the human race, as the number one post-celestial race, became more and more prosperous. Boundless luck gathered, causing the human race to produce a large number of experts. Even more than 10 Daluo Jingxian appeared one after another. To a certain extent, the current strength of the human race had far surpassed the 3 sections. This did not mean that the human race was very strong, but that the 3 sects were too weak. Even if the 3 sects were the orthodoxies of the saints, it could not hide the fact that the 3 sects were very weak. How weak were they? In the huge 3 sects, there were only 3 Daluo Jingxian, Xianqing, Xiandu, and Duobao. TSK. It was embarrassing to say that there were only 3 Daluo Jingxian. It was really a disgrace to the teachings of the saints. But unfortunately, this was the sins of the saints themselves. They could not blame their disciples. It could even be said that it was precisely because of their burden that their disciples were unable to attain the Tao. Otherwise, with the talent of Guangchengzi, Taiyi, 3 Shao, and the others, they would have attained the Tao long ago. They would not have still been in the realm of Taiyi Jingxian until now. That's right. Other than Xianqing, Xiandu, and Duobao, the rest of the disciples of the 3 sects were mostly in the realm of Taiyi Jingxian. The reason was still because of their master. Back then, the saints sat and watched the great Magi-demon war, causing the apocalyptic calamity to erupt in the primordial world. Countless living beings died because of it. All sorts of things naturally attracted endless negative karma. However, saints were not tainted by negative karma. Therefore, these negative karma could not do anything to saints. However, since negative karma was born, it would not disappear for no reason. Therefore, in the situation where they could not deal with saints, those negative karma followed the connection in the unseen world and descended on the heads of their disciples. They were sitting at home, and the tribulation came from the sky. For some reason, the disciples of the 3 sects were burdened with the crime of destroying the world. It was not easy to survive with monstrous negative karma, and they still wanted to attain the Tao? Wasn't that a dream? Only Xiandu, Xianqing, and Duobao had attained the Tao earlier, so they escaped this calamity. However, the rest did not have the strength of the 3 of them, so they were all affected. The path of the Tao. It was broken just like that. If nothing unexpected happened, they would forever stay in the realm of Taiyi Jingxian. However, the 3 pure ones would not sit back and watch the situation continue. If their disciples could not attain the Tao, they would lose face. Therefore, they had been looking for a solution. Nearly 10 million years had passed, and the 3 pure ones had also thought of a solution. Now they were in the chaos outside the heavens. While defending against the chaos demon god, they were also deducing a solution. They reckoned that when they returned to the primordial world, they would be able to solve the problem of their disciples being unable to break through. Of course, this was the 3 pure ones' matter. It had nothing to do with Feng Zichen. Right now, there was something closely related to Feng Zichen that was happening. With the advent of the postnatal era, countless amounts of luck between heaven and earth gathered crazily towards the Gauchan planet. The luck was so dense that it almost condensed into a huge storm visible to the naked eye in the sky above the Gauchan planet. Boom, boom, boom. The wind whistled and made a huge sound of friction with the air, attracting the attention of a large group of powerful beings. Oh my God! So much luck! Seeing the scene on the Gauchan planet, the group of powerful beings were so shocked that they were speechless. Luck that was almost condensed into a substance. When had they ever seen such a scene? It was really too much. After the shock, there was only envy left in everyone's hearts. With so much luck, if they could share some of it, even if it was only 1/3, it would not be long before they could push them to the realm of primordial chaos Dalyo Jingxian. But unfortunately, this kind of thing could only be thought about. This was the luck that the heavens and earth gathered spontaneously. It could not be snatched or destroyed. Therefore, even if everyone was envious, they could not touch it at all. Without a doubt, this luck all belonged to Feng Zichen, the emperor of the Gauchan. With the arrival of the postnatal era, as the #1 living being in the postnatal era, Feng Zichen also began to gradually show his sharpness. The luck of heaven and earth gathered. This was the first step. After that, there were endless benefits waiting for him. If Feng Zichen could seize the opportunity and imitate the great Tao passed down by Tao ancestor Hong Jun, then under the push of endless luck, he might have the possibility of becoming a Tao ancestor. The postnatal Tao ancestor was Feng Zichen's future Tao ancestor. I didn't expect that the #1 living being in the postnatal era would have such benefits. The great Taoist priest's encounters are really enviable. With the help of this luck, I'm afraid that it won't be long before there will be another primordial chaos Dalyo Jingxian in the primordial world. Looking at the luck on the Gauchan planet, everyone said with envy. Back then, they felt that as the #1 living being in the postnatal era, Feng Zichen would definitely have great fortune in the future. However, they did not expect that this fortune would be so great. It completely exceeded their imagination. That was also true. At that time, the primordial world was at the peak of the postnatal era. At that time, who would have thought that such a glorious postnatal era would wither and be replaced by the postnatal era? Everything was fate. There was no point in being envious. However, from the looks of this luck gathering on the Gauchan planet, the Emperor of the Gauchan was indeed faking his death last time. Really? Sigh. Through this luck, it was not difficult for everyone to sense the true situation of the Gauchan. If the Gauchan had really fallen, then the postnatal luck would not appear at all. At the very least, it would not appear before he was resurrected. This was because the dead had no comic luck. Chapter 660. Only when a living person's aura permeated between heaven and earth could the providence from all directions gather. Sigh. This is the second time. I wonder what His Majesty is planning for him to repeatedly fake his death. One must know that with his identity as the great Taoist priests, if he is willing to focus on cultivation, it won't take long for him to become a carefree primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. He won't be like today, stuck in the half-step primordial chaos realm like us. However, after today, everything will be different. With the help of so much providence, it will be difficult for great Emperor Gauchan not to break through. With the power of heaven and earth, under the push of endless providence, isn't it easy to achieve Tao? Everyone retracted their gaze from Gauchan's star and sighed. Don't look, don't look. If they continue looking, their hearts might not be able to take it. This kind of opportunity could not be envied. Boom, boom, boom. On Gauchan's star, in the Gauchan Celestial Palace, as the endless providence surged, the giant cocoon formed by great Emperor Gauchan was beating wildly. Every time it beat, it seemed to have reached a resonance with the myriad Tao of heaven and earth, affecting the pulse of heaven and earth, causing it to beat rhythmically. Vaguely, an unparalleled pressure spread out, suppressing heaven and earth, the past, present, and future. This is the aura of primordial chaos. He was about to break through. Great Emperor Gauchan was about to break through. He, who was already in the transformation period, was finally about to take that crucial step under the push of endless providence and cultivate to the realm of primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. One could see that. The huge Gauchan celestial palace was filled with boundless providence, almost condensing to the point where it could be seen with the naked eye. Boom! Just as the providence condensed to the limit, an inexplicable force appeared. Then, like a spark falling into a pot of oil, the providence burned with a boom, turning into a dazzling Tao fire. It burned fiercely and released unparalleled energy, surging toward the giant cocoon formed by great Emperor Gauchan. Providence was the #1 treasure of the primordial chaos. It had unimaginable power. His power could be said to be mysterious to the extreme. The power of a flame ignited with him as the fuel could be imagined. It was absolutely beyond imagination. You can see that. Under the burning of the fire of providence, the cocoon formed by the North Star Emperor underwent a tremendous change. Sizzle! Wisps of black smoke rose from it and slowly dissipated into the void. Those were the impurities from the North Star Emperor's body. To be precise, it was the impurities in the power of faith. Back then, in order to recover his strength as soon as possible, the North Star Emperor had chosen to use the power of faith. He used his great magic to transform the power of faith accumulated by the Gauchan Celestial Palace for nearly 10 million years into a huge cocoon of light. His true spirit entered the cocoon and used the power of faith to reconstruct his Tao body. This was the origin of the cocoon of light in the North Star Heavenly Palace. It was also the method that the North Star Emperor used to revive himself. The power of faith was a miraculous power born from the hearts of all living beings. It had the ability to make dreams come true. Using this power to reconstruct the Tao body, the speed was unbelievably fast. However, the power of faith was not without its own hidden dangers. As the saying goes, incense is poisonous. How could the power born from the hearts of all living beings be so easily absorbed? The power of faith was mainly formed by the thoughts in everyone's hearts. They may be good or bad, but all of them carried the distracting thoughts of all living beings. Perhaps one or two wouldn't be a problem, but if the thoughts of countless living beings attacked together, even a great divine ability expert would probably lose himself completely under the impact of the thoughts of all living beings. Even though the faith force used by great Emperor Gauchan had been refined by Xianxia and removed the 7 emotions and 6 desires of the living beings, it was still not enough. But after all, Xianxia was just the Xianxia of the human race, its power was limited, and it might not be able to remove all the impurities in it. If it was any other time, some impurities might not affect anything. However, things were different when one broke through to primordial chaos. A primordial chaos cultivator's primordial chaos was perfect and flawless. The slightest flaw was enough to cause the breakthrough to fail. Therefore, making use of this rare opportunity, the North Star Emperor used his fate as the fire to temper his body. He wanted to completely resolve the hidden danger of the faith power in his body. Luck was the most mysterious power in the untainted land. If even he could not solve the hidden dangers of incense and willpower, then there was really no other way to solve the hidden dangers of incense and willpower in the primordial world. But, was this possible? There might be things that luck could not solve, but it would definitely not be incense and willpower. As time passed, more and more luck gathered, causing the fire of luck under the light cocoon to burn even more brightly. And under the burning of the fire of luck, more and more impurities were refined out of the light cocoon. Great Emperor Gaochun's Dao body became even more perfect. An aura that was close to perfection was emitted from his body. It was abnormally mysterious. He was getting closer and closer to primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. He would probably attain Dao in another 1,000,000 years. And after 1,000,000 years, it would be his turn to become the Celestial Emperor. With primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian's potential to ascend to the position of Celestial Emperor, the scene at that time would definitely be very exciting. Thinking about it, it was really exciting. Time passed unknowingly, and Great Emperor Gaochun had been silently transforming in the Gaochun star, waiting for the day he attained Dao. In 1,000,000 years it was enough for too many things to happen. The most famous one was the abdication of the human emperor, Emperor Yao, and the succession of the human emperor, Emperor Shun. Just like that, the human race welcomed the fifth and last great emperor. Not long after the transfer of the supreme power of the human race, the high and mighty heavenly court's power also changed. On this day, Heavenly Emperor Xianxia, who had not moved for 1,000,000 years, suddenly walked out of the heavenly court and headed to the South Pole in the boundless starry sky. No one knew the purpose of Heavenly Emperor Xuanqing's actions. They only saw that 3 days after Heavenly Emperor Xianxia went to the South Pole, the South Pole suddenly emitted a bright divine light, shocking the entire primordial world. Then, an endless amount of lightning began to spread. It was like an ocean that covered the entire sky. Rumble. Thunder rumbled incessantly. Until 3 years later, it turned into a heavenly palace and slowly disappeared. It was also on this day, the South Pole Emperor reappeared in the primordial world and walked out of the South Pole to the heavenly court. In the name of the South Pole Immortal Emperor, he ruled the primordial world. This also marked the change of ownership of the heavenly court. The era that belonged to Heavenly Emperor Xianxia had become a thing of the past. The current primordial world welcomed the era of the South Pole Emperor. Boom! It was like a bolt of lightning. The news of Xuanqing's abdication and the South Pole Emperor's ascension spread among the great mediums at an astonishing speed. Soon, almost all the great mediums were awakened by this news and looked at the heavenly court in bewilderment. They were puzzled as to why the South Pole Emperor suddenly appeared and took over the authority of the heavenly court. However, although they were puzzled, they could not stop it. Because, unlike the human emperor and Xianxia, the South Pole Emperor was the supreme of heaven and earth. In the era when the heavenly emperor did not appear and the other great emperors were in seclusion, he was the well-deserved master of heaven and earth. It was most appropriate for him to take charge of the heavenly court. Even the heavenly Tao approved of this. In the past, if the heavenly court changed owners and a new emperor ascended the throne, it had to be witnessed by everyone to complete the last step and obtain the recognition of heaven and earth. But the South Pole Emperor did not need it. Because he was the supreme of the primordial world recognized by heaven and earth, why did he need others to recognize him? A group of great mediums had the ability to stop the human emperor from becoming the heavenly emperor, but they did not have the ability to stop the 4 heavenly emperors from becoming the heavenly emperor. An outsider becoming the heavenly emperor was called promotion. And the 4 heavenly emperors becoming the heavenly emperor was fulfilling their duty. If an outsider dared to stop them, it would be defying the heavens. It would definitely attract the wrath of the heavens and end up in a miserable state. Therefore, with the ascension of the South Pole Emperor, the great mediums of the primordial world had already lost the ability to control the heavenly court. How the heavenly emperor would choose in the future was the matter of the 4 heavenly emperors. It had nothing to do with them anymore. They could finally go into seclusion properly. Boom, boom, boom. Above the heavenly court, countless bolts of lightning were ready to strike. They locked onto the primordial world from afar, as if they were about to descend upon the world and destroy all life. This strange phenomenon was the symbol of the South Pole Emperor as the Heavenly Emperor. Although the South Pole Longevity Emperor was known as the Longevity Emperor, in fact, he was the emperor who controlled the power of punishment in the primordial world. He had the power to control lightning and was known as the Lord of all lightning. Because he controlled the heavenly tribulation, he was also known as the Lord of Heavenly Tribulation. The Heavenly Emperor, who controlled the power of punishment, knew what it would bring to the primordial world. During the reign of the South Pole Emperor, he took it as his responsibility to maintain the operation of the heavenly Tao. Anyone who dared to defy the heavens, commit heinous crimes, or violate the heavenly rules, and so on would be punished by him. The connate divine thunder that densely covered the sky above the heavenly court was prepared for this. It could be said that during the reign of the Thunder Lake Emperor, it could be considered the best era of the primordial world, and it was also the happiest time for mortals to live. In this era, even someone as strong as Daluo Jingxian did not dare to kill mortals wantonly, let alone ordinary cultivators. Otherwise, what greeted them would be the anger of the South Pole Longevity Emperor. The true anger of thunder. Oh right, during the reign of the South Pole Emperor, there was one thing that had to be said. That was the so-called heavenly rules, which were also the laws against immortals. It was perfected in the hands of the South Pole Emperor. It was that rule that caused a lot of trouble in the later generations. The rule that immortals and mortals could not fall in love was also set by the South Pole Emperor. This was not because the South Pole Emperor had any problems in his heart, but because the heavenly Tao had made such a rule. Feng Zichen was such a lazy person. How could he specially take out a portion of his time to deduce heavenly rules for the heavenly court? Of course, it was to directly copy the heavenly Tao and list all the things that the heavenly Tao did not allow. Wasn't this a ready-made heavenly rule? In this way, even if there was a mistake in the future, it would be the fault of the heavenly Tao, and it would have nothing to do with Feng Zichen. That was the request of the heavenly Tao. What else could he do? Of course he had to follow it. Could it be that he still had to defy the request of the heavenly Tao? Moreover, from Feng Zichen's point of view, he did not feel that there was a problem with this rule. Not allowing immortals and mortals to fall in love was not allowing immortals to fall in love, but immortals and mortals were not allowed to fall in love. Immortals and mortals were two different species. If they were forcefully combined, they would not be happy. Think about it. Immortals were so powerful. They could move mountains and fill seas with a raise of their hands. What about mortals? Not to mention moving mountains and filling seas, they could not even lift a slightly larger rock. Compared to immortals, mortals were too weak. How were they different from ants? Just a breath could take a mortal's life. With such a huge gap, how could they be happy if they were still together? To put it bluntly, if an immortal was agitated and used a little strength, he would probably be able to tear a mortal into pieces on the spot. In this way, should he save or not? If he did not save, he would not be able to live with himself. If he saved, he would really be courting death. Bringing the dead back to life was a heaven-defying act. At any time, it was a great taboo of the heavenly Tao. Daluo Jingxian could do it at will. Tai Jingxian could also do it if he paid a price. However, ordinary immortals would definitely not be able to do it. Because what he had to fight against was the entire world. The combination of immortals and mortals was the beginning of the tragedy. Therefore, the heavenly Tao would not allow such a situation to happen. Husband and wife were harmonious. That was just the plot of a novel. The reality was that immortals and mortals lived together. They had to be careful in everything they did so as not to accidentally kill mortals. The difference was too great. It was just like how humans and ants lived together. They had to be vigilant at all times, afraid that they would accidentally kill the ants. Of course, if their love was unwavering, then they could nurture each other into immortals. The heavenly rules only stipulated that immortals and mortals could not fall in love, but they did not stipulate that immortals could not fall in love with immortals. If they wanted to fall in love with mortals, they could either cripple their own cultivation, reincarnate, or nurture each other into immortals. The heavenly rules were so harsh. Of course. No matter how strong the heavenly rules were, they were only targeted at ordinary immortals. When one's strength reached Tai Jingxian, they could basically ignore them. After all, no matter what era it was, the strong all had special privileges. The bigger the fist, the harder the truth. Amidst the rumbling of thunder, time quietly passed. Unknowingly, 1,000,000 years had passed. Rumble. On this day, the destiny of the human race shook. That vast aura spread out from the long river of destiny, shocking the entire primordial world. This was. The destiny of the human race was perfect. They had completely stabilized the position of the protagonist of the world. And the reason for all of this was that Emperor Shun had completed his merit. He stepped down from the position of the human emperor and went to the Fire Cloud Cave. Emperor Shun, the 6th grandson of Emperor Xuanxiu. He was also the 5th great emperor of the human race. At the same time, he was also the last destined great emperor of the human race. As his merit was completed, the heavenly Tao had set an opportunity for the human race to prosper. The 3 emperors and 5 emperors, these 8 supreme positions could be considered to have been completely completed. Therefore, the moment Emperor Shun abdicated, heaven and earth immediately sensed it. Endless destiny gathered and spontaneously poured into the destiny of the human race to help it complete the final transformation and completely stabilize the position of the protagonist of heaven and earth. On this day, the primordial world shook. Under the astonished gazes of all living beings, a vast river appeared with a loud rumble, vast and mighty. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.